Praxis is the process by which a theory, lesson, or skill is enacted, embodied, realized, applied, or put into practice. Praxis may also refer to the act of engaging, applying, exercising, realizing, or practicing ideas. This has been a recurrent topic in the field of philosophy, discussed in the writings of Plato, Aristotle, St. Augustine, Francis Bacon, Immanuel Kant, Soren Kierkegaard, Ludwig von Mises, Karl Marx, Antonio Gramsci, Martin Heidegger, Hannah Arendt, Jean-Paul Sartre, Paulo Freire, Murray Rothbard, and many others. It has meaning in the political, educational, spiritual and medical realms. Origins. The word praxis is from ancient Greek, pyrosai iota, Romanized, praxis. In ancient Greek the word praxis, pyrosai iota, referred to activity engaged in by free people. The philosopher Aristotle held that there were three basic activities of humans: theoria, thinking, poiesis, making, and praxis, doing. Corresponding to these activities were three types of knowledge: theoretical, the end goal being truth; poetical, the end goal being production; and practical, the end goal being action. 1. Aristotle further divided the knowledge derived from praxis into ethics, economics, and politics. He also distinguished between eupraxia, epsilon pyro alpha xi alpha, good praxis, 2, and dyspraxia, delta upsilon sigma pyro alpha xi alpha, bad praxis, misfortune. 3. Marxism. Part of a series on the Frankfurt School. Major works. Notable theorists. Important concepts. Related topics. Philosophy Portal. Icon Society Portal. Veit. Young Hegelian August Tsiolkovsky was one of the earliest philosophers to use the term praxis to mean action oriented towards changing society in his 1838 work Prolegomena zur Historiosophie, Prolegomena to a Historiosophy. 4. Tsiolkovsky argued that while absolute truth had been achieved in the speculative philosophy of Hegel, the deep divisions and contradictions in man's consciousness could only be resolved through concrete practical activity that directly influences social life. 4. Although there is no evidence that Karl Marx himself read this book, 5. It may have had an indirect influence on his thought through the writings of his friend Moses Hess. 6. 7. Anarchist banner in Dresden, Germany, translating to Solidarity must become praxis, January 20, 2020. Marx uses the term praxis to refer to the free, universal, creative and self-creative activity through which man creates and changes his historical world and himself. 8. Praxis is an activity unique to man, which distinguishes him from all other beings. 8. The concept appears in two of Marx's early works, the Economic and Philosophical Manuscripts of 1844 and the Theses on Feuerbach, 1845. 5. In the former work, Marx contrasts the free, conscious productive activity of human beings with the unconscious, compulsive production of animals. 5. He also affirms the primacy of praxis over theory, claiming that theoretical contradictions can only be resolved through practical activity. 5. In the latter work, revolutionary practice is a central theme. The coincidence of the changing of circumstances and of human activity or self-change, Selbstveränderung, can be conceived and rationally understood only as revolutionary practice. Third thesis. 9. All social life is essentially practical. All the mysteries which lead theory towards mysticism find their rational solution in human praxis and in the comprehension of this praxis. Eighth thesis. 9. Philosophers have hitherto only interpreted the world in various ways, the point is to change it. 11th thesis. 9. Marx here criticizes the materialist philosophy of Ludwig Feuerbach for envisaging objects in a contemplative way. Marx argues that perception is itself a component of man's practical relationship to the world. To understand the world does not mean considering it from the outside, judging it morally or explaining it scientifically. Society cannot be changed by reformers who understand its needs, only by the revolutionary praxis of the mass whose interest coincides with that of society as a whole, the proletariat. This will be an act of society understanding itself, in which the subject changes the object by the very fact of understanding it. 10. Seemingly inspired by the theses, the 19th-century socialist Antonio Labriola called Marxism the philosophy of praxis. 11. This description of Marxism would appear again in Antonio Gramsci's prison notebooks. 11. And the writings of the members of the Frankfurt School. 12. 13. Praxis is also an important theme for Marxist thinkers such as George Lukács, Karl Korsch, Karel Kosik and Henri Lefebvre, and was seen as the central concept of Marx's thought by Yugoslavia's Praxis school, which established a journal of that name in 1964. 13. Jean-Paul Sartre. In the Critique of Dialectical Reason, Jean-Paul Sartre posits a view of individual praxis as the basis of human history. 14. In his view, praxis is an attempt to negate human need. 15. In a revision of Marxism and his earlier existentialism. 16. Sartre argues that the fundamental relation of human history is scarcity. 17. Conditions of scarcity generate competition for resources, exploitation of one over another and division of labor, which in its turn creates struggle between classes. Each individual experiences the other as a threat to his or her own survival and praxis. It is always a possibility that one's individual freedom limits another's. 18. Sartre recognizes both natural and man-made constraints on freedom. He calls the non-unified practical activity of humans the practico-inert. 14. Sartre opposes to individual praxis a group praxis that fuses each individual to be accountable to each other in a common purpose. 19. Sartre sees a mass movement in a successful revolution as the best exemplar of such a fused group. 29. Hannah Arendt. In The Human Condition, Hannah Arendt argues that Western philosophy too often has focused on the contemplative life, vita contemplativa, and has neglected the active life, vita activa. This has led humanity to frequently miss much of the everyday relevance of philosophical ideas to real life. 21. 22. For Arendt, praxis is the highest and most important level of the active life. 22. Thus, she argues that more philosophers need to engage in everyday political action or praxis, which she sees as the true realization of human freedom. 21. According to Arendt, our capacity to analyze ideas, wrestle with them, and engage in active praxis is what makes us uniquely human. In Maurizio Passeron-Dietrives's estimation, Arendt's theory of action and her revival of the ancient notion of praxis represent one of the most original contributions to 20th-century political thought. Moreover, by viewing action as a mode of human togetherness, Arendt is able to develop a conception of participatory democracy which stands in direct contrast to the bureaucratized and elitist forms of politics so characteristic of the modern epoch. 23. Education. Praxis is used by educators to describe a recurring passage through a cyclical process of experiential learning, such as the cycle described and popularized by David A. Kolb. 24. Paulo Freire defines praxis in Pedagogy of the Oppressed as reflection and action directed at the structures to be transformed. 25. Through praxis, oppressed people can acquire a critical awareness of their own condition, and, with teacher-students and students-teachers, struggle for liberation. 26. In the Channel 4 television documentary New Order, Play at Home, 27, 28, Factory Records owner Tony Wilson describes praxis as doing something, and then only afterwards, finding out why you did it. Praxis may be described as a form of critical thinking and comprises the combination of reflection and action. Praxis can be viewed as a progression of cognitive and physical actions. Taking the action, considering the impacts of the action, analyzing the results of the action by reflecting upon it, altering and revising conceptions and planning following reflection, implementing these plans in further actions. This creates a cycle which can be viewed in terms of educational settings, learners and educational facilitators. Scott and Marshall, 2009, refer to praxis as the philosophical term referring to human action on the natural and social world, citation needed. Furthermore, Gramsci, 1999, emphasizes the power of praxis in selections from the prison notebooks by stating that the philosophy of praxis does not tend to leave the simple in their primitive philosophy of common sense but rather to lead them to a higher conception of life. To reveal the inadequacies of religion, folklore, intellectualism and other such one-sided forms of reasoning, Gramsci appeals directly in his later work to Marx's philosophy of praxis, describing it as a concrete mode of reasoning. This principally involves the juxtaposition of a dialectical and scientific audit of reality, against all existing normative, ideological, and therefore counterfeit accounts. Essentially a philosophy based on a practice, Marx's philosophy, is described correspondingly in this manner, as the only philosophy that is at the same time a history and action or a life itself. Gramsci, Hoare and Noel Smith, 1972, page 332. Spirituality. See also, Praxis, Eastern Orthodoxy. Praxis is also key in meditation and spirituality, where emphasis is placed on gaining first-hand experience of concepts in certain areas, such as union with the divine, which can only be explored through praxis due to the inability of the finite mind, and its tool, language, to comprehend or express the infinite. In an interview for Yes magazine, Matthew Fox explained it this way. Wisdom is always taste in both Latin and Hebrew. The word for wisdom comes from the word for taste, so it's something to taste, not something to theorize about. Taste and see that God is good, the psalm says, and that's wisdom, tasting life. No one can do it for us. The mystical tradition is very much a Sophia tradition. It is about tasting and trusting experience, before institution or dogma. 29. According to Strong's Concordance, the Hebrew word ta'am is, properly, a taste. This is, figuratively, perception and, by implication, intelligence, transitively, a mandate, advice, behavior, decree, discretion, judgment, reason, taste, understanding. Medicine. Praxis is the ability to perform voluntary skilled movements. The partial or complete inability to do so in the absence of primary sensory or motor impairments is known as apraxia. 30. See also. Apraxia. Christian theological praxis. Hexis. Lex artis. Orthopraxy. Praxeology. Praxis discussion series. Praxis, disambiguation. Praxis intervention. Praxis school. Practice, social theory. Theses on Feuerbach. Diagnosis, PL, diagnoses, is the identification of the nature and cause of a certain phenomenon. Diagnosis is used in many different disciplines, with variations in the use of logic, analytics, and experience, to determine cause and effect. In systems engineering and computer science, it is typically used to determine the causes of symptoms, mitigations, and solutions. 1. Computer science and networking. Bayesian network. Complex event processing. Diagnosis, artificial intelligence. Event correlation. Fault management. Fault tree analysis. Gray problem. RPR problem diagnosis. Remote diagnostics. Root cause analysis. Troubleshooting. Unified diagnostic services. Mathematics and logic. Bayesian probability. Bloch-Hackham's dictum. Occam's razor. Regression diagnostics. Sutton's law. Medicine. Medical diagnosis. Molecular diagnostics. Methods. CDR computerized assessment system. Computer-aided diagnosis. Differential diagnosis. Retrospective diagnosis. Tools. Delta, taxonomy. D-spline. List of diagnostic classification and rating scales used in psychiatry. Organizational development. Organizational diagnostics. Systems engineering. 5 Whys. 8 disciplines problem solving. Fault detection and isolation. Problem solving. Prognosis, Greek, pyrogamenu omega sigma iota foreknowing, foreseeing, PL. Prognosis is a medical term for predicting the likelihood or expected development of a disease, including whether the signs and symptoms will improve or worsen, and how quickly, or remain stable over time. Expectations of quality of life, such as the ability to carry out daily activities, the potential for complications and associated health issues, and the likelihood of survival, including life expectancy. 1, 2. A prognosis is made on the basis of the normal course of the diagnosed disease, the individual's physical and mental condition, the available treatments, and additional factors. 2. A complete prognosis includes the expected duration, function, and description of the course of the disease, such as progressive decline, intermittent crisis, or sudden, unpredictable crisis. When applied to large statistical populations, prognostic estimates can be very accurate. For example, the statement 45% of patients with severe septic shock will die within 28 days can be made with some confidence, because previous research found that this proportion of patients died. This statistical information does not apply to the prognosis for each individual patient, because patient-specific factors can substantially change the expected course of the disease. Additional information is needed to determine whether a patient belongs to the 45% who will die or to the 55% who survive. 3. Methodology. Disease and prognostic indicators. Prognostic scoring is also used for cancer outcome predictions. A Manchester score is an indicator of prognosis for small cell lung cancer. For non-Hodgkin lymphoma, physicians have developed the International Prognostic Index to predict patient outcome. Other medical areas where prognostic indicators are used is in drug-induced liver injury, DILI, Hy's law, and use of an exercise stress test as a prognostic indicator after myocardial infarction, also used to indicate multiple myeloma survival rate. 4. End of life. Studies have found that most doctors are overly optimistic when making a prognosis. They tend to overstate how long a patient might live. For patients who are critically ill, particularly those in an intensive care unit, there are numerical prognostic scoring systems that are more accurate. The most famous of these is the Apache 2 scale, which is most accurate when applied in the 7 days prior to a patient's predicted death. Knowing the prognosis helps determine whether it makes more sense to attempt certain treatments or to withhold them, and thus plays an important role in end-of-life decisions and advanced care planning. 5. Estimator. Estimators that are commonly used to describe prognosis include progression-free survival, the length of time during and after medication or treatment during which the disease being treated, usually cancer, does not get worse. Survival rate, indicating the percentage of people in a study or treatment group who are alive for a given period of time after diagnosis. Survival time, the remaining duration of life. If not otherwise specified, it generally starts from the time of diagnosis. History. One of the earliest written works of medicine is the Book of Prognostics of Hippocrates, written around 400 BC. This work opens with the following statement: "It appears to me a most excellent thing for the physician to cultivate prognosis, for by foreseeing and foretelling, in the presence of the sick, the present, the past, and the future, and explaining the omissions which patients have been guilty of, he will be the more readily believed to be acquainted with the circumstances of the sick, so that men will have confidence to entrust themselves to such a physician." 6. For 19th-century physicians, particularly those following the French school of medicine, the main aim of medicine was not to cure disease, but rather to give a medical diagnosis and achieve a satisfying prognosis of the patient's chances. Only several decades later did the focus of efforts in Western medicine shift to curing disease. Citation needed. See also: medical diagnosis, nocebo, optimism bias, placebo, origins of technical term, prediction, reference class forecasting, sign, medicine, symptom. Preventive healthcare, or prophylaxis, is the application of healthcare measures to prevent diseases. 1. Disease and disability are affected by environmental factors, genetic predisposition, disease agents, and lifestyle choices, and are dynamic processes which begin before individuals realize they are affected. Disease prevention relies on anticipatory actions that can be categorized as primal, 2, 3, primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention. 1. Each year, millions of people die of preventable deaths. A 2004 study showed that about half of all deaths in the United States in 2000 were due to preventable behaviors and exposures. 4. Leading causes included cardiovascular disease, chronic respiratory disease, unintentional injuries, diabetes, and certain infectious diseases. 4. This same study estimates that 400,000 people die each year in the United States due to poor diet and a sedentary lifestyle. 4. According to estimates made by the World Health Organization, WHO, about 55 million people died worldwide in 2011, two-thirds of this group from non-communicable diseases, including cancer, diabetes, and chronic cardiovascular and lung diseases. 5. This is an increase from the year 2000, during which 60% of deaths were attributed to these diseases. 5. Preventive healthcare is especially important given the worldwide rise in prevalence of chronic diseases and deaths from these diseases. There are many methods for prevention of disease. One of them is prevention of teenage smoking through information giving. 6, 7, 8, 9. It is recommended that adults and children aim to visit their doctor for regular checkups, even if they feel healthy, to perform disease screening, identify risk factors for disease, discuss tips for a healthy and balanced lifestyle, stay up to date with immunizations and boosters, and maintain a good relationship with a healthcare provider. 10. In pediatrics, some common examples of primary prevention are encouraging parents to turn down the temperature of their home water heater in order to avoid scalding burns, encouraging children to wear bicycle helmets, and suggesting that people use the Air Quality Index (AQI) to check the level of pollution in the outside air before engaging in sporting activities. Some common disease screenings include checking for hypertension, high blood pressure, hyperglycemia, high blood sugar, a risk factor for diabetes mellitus, hypercholesterolemia, high blood cholesterol, screening for colon cancer, depression, HIV, and other common types of sexually transmitted disease such as chlamydia, syphilis, and gonorrhea, mammography, to screen for breast cancer, colorectal cancer screening, a pap test, to check for cervical cancer, and screening for osteoporosis. Genetic testing can also be performed to screen for mutations that cause genetic disorders or predisposition to certain diseases such as breast or ovarian cancer. 10. However, these measures are not affordable for every individual and the cost-effectiveness of preventive healthcare is still a topic of debate. 11. 12. Overview. Preventive healthcare strategies are described as taking place at the primal, 2, primary, 13, secondary, and tertiary prevention levels. Although advocated as preventive medicine in the early 20th century by Sarah Josephine Baker, 14, in the 1940s, Hugh Arth Level and E. Gurney Clark coined the term primary prevention. They worked at the Harvard and Columbia University Schools of Public Health, respectively, and later expanded the levels to include secondary and tertiary prevention. Goldston, 1987, notes that these levels might be better described as prevention, treatment, and rehabilitation, although the terms primary, secondary, and tertiary prevention are still in use today. The concept of primal prevention has been created much more recently, in relation to the new developments in molecular biology over the last 50 years, 15, more particularly in epigenetics, which point to the paramount importance of environmental conditions, both physical and affective, on the organism during its fetal and newborn life, or so-called primal period of life. 3. Level definition. Primal and primordial prevention. Primal prevention has been propounded as a separate category of health promotion based on the evidence that epigenetic processes start at conception. See below, primal and primordial preventions. Primordial prevention refers to measures designed to avoid the development of risk factors in the first place, early in life. 16, 17. Primary prevention methods to avoid occurrence of disease either through eliminating disease agents or increasing resistance to disease. 18. Examples include immunization against disease, maintaining a healthy diet and exercise regimen, and avoiding smoking. 19. Secondary prevention methods to detect and address an existing disease prior to the appearance of symptoms. 18. Examples include treatment of hypertension, a risk factor for many cardiovascular diseases, and cancer screenings. 19. Tertiary prevention methods to reduce the harm of symptomatic disease, such as disability or death, through rehabilitation and treatment. 18. Examples include surgical procedures that halt the spread or progression of disease. 18. Quaternary prevention methods to mitigate or avoid results of unnecessary or excessive interventions in the health system, including potential violations of rights. 20. Primal and primordial preventions. See also, Parent Education Program. Primal prevention is health promotion par excellence. 21. New knowledge in molecular biology, in particular epigenetics, points to how much effective as well as physical environment during fetal and newborn life may determine adult health. 22, 23, 24, 25. This way of promoting health consists mainly in providing future parents with pertinent, unbiased information on primal health and supporting them during their child's primal period of life, i.e., from conception to first anniversary. According to definition by the Primal Health Research Centre, London. This includes adequate parental leave, ideally for both parents, with kin caregiving and financial help where needed. 26. Primordial prevention refers to all measures designed to prevent the development of risk factors in the first place, early in life. 16, 17, and even preconception, as Ruth A. Etzel has described it, all population-level actions and measures that inhibit the emergence and establishment of adverse environmental, economic, and social conditions. This could be reducing air pollution. 27, or prohibiting endocrine-disrupting chemicals in food handling equipment and food contact materials. 28. Primary prevention. Primary prevention consists of traditional health promotion and specific protection. 18. Health promotion activities include prevention strategies such as health education and lifestyle medicine, and are current, non-clinical life choices such as eating nutritious meals and exercising often, that prevent lifestyle-related medical conditions, improve the quality of life, and create a sense of overall well-being. 29. Preventing disease and creating overall well-being prolongs life expectancy. 1. 18. Health promotional activities do not target a specific disease or condition but rather promote health and well-being on a very general level, 1. On the other hand, specific protection targets a type or group of diseases and complements the goals of health promotion. 18. Food. Food is the most basic tool in preventive health care. Citation needed. Access. The 2011 National Health Interview Survey performed by the Centers for Disease Control was the first national survey to include questions about ability to pay for food. Difficulty with paying for food, medicine, or both is a problem facing 1 out of 3 Americans. If better food options were available through food banks, soup kitchens, and other resources for low-income people, obesity and the chronic conditions that come along with it would be better controlled. 30. A food desert is an area with restricted access to healthy foods due to a lack of supermarkets within a reasonable distance. These are often low-income neighborhoods with the majority of residents lacking transportation. 31. There have been several grassroots movements since 1995 to encourage urban gardening, using vacant lots to grow food cultivated by local residents. 32. Mobile fresh markets are another resource for residents in a food desert, which are specially outfitted buses bringing affordable fresh fruits and vegetables to low-income neighborhoods. 33. Food education and guidance. It has been proposed that healthy longevity diets are included in standard healthcare, as switching from a typical Western diet could often extend life by a decade. 34. Protective measures. See also, screening, medicine, and biomarker, medicine. Icon. This section needs expansion. You can help by adding to it. June 2022. Specific protective measures such as water purification, sewage treatment, and the development of personal hygienic routines, such as regular handwashing, safe sex to prevent sexually transmitted infections, became mainstream upon the discovery of infectious disease agents and have decreased the rates of communicable diseases which are spread in unsanitary conditions. 1. Scientific advancements in genetics have contributed to the knowledge of hereditary diseases and have facilitated progress in specific protective measures in individuals who are carriers of a disease gene or have an increased predisposition to a specific disease. Genetic testing has allowed physicians to make quicker and more accurate diagnoses and has allowed for tailored treatments or personalized medicine. 1. Food safety has a significant impact on human health and food quality monitoring has increased. 35. Water, including drinking water, is also monitored in many cases for securing health. There also is some monitoring of air pollution. In many cases, environmental standards such as via maximum pollution levels, regulation of chemicals, occupational hygiene requirements or consumer protection regulations establish some protection in combination with the monitoring. Citation needed. Preventative measures like vaccines and medical screenings are also important. 36. Using PPE properly and getting the recommended vaccines and screenings can help decrease the spread of respiratory diseases, protecting the healthcare workers as well as their patients. 37. 38. Secondary prevention. Secondary prevention deals with latent diseases and attempts to prevent an asymptomatic disease from progressing to symptomatic disease. 18. Certain diseases can be classified as primary or secondary. This depends on definitions of what constitutes a disease, though, in general, primary prevention addresses the root cause of a disease or injury. 18. Whereas secondary prevention aims to detect and treat a disease early on. 39. Secondary prevention consists of early diagnosis and prompt treatment to contain the disease and prevent its spread to other individuals, and disability limitation to prevent potential future complications and disabilities from the disease. 1. Early diagnosis and prompt treatment for a syphilis patient would include a course of antibiotics to destroy the pathogen and screening and treatment of any infants born to syphilitic mothers. Disability limitation for syphilitic patients includes continued checkups on the heart, cerebrospinal fluid, and central nervous system of patients to curb any damaging effects such as blindness or paralysis. 1. Tertiary prevention. Finally, tertiary prevention attempts to reduce the damage caused by symptomatic disease by focusing on mental, physical, and social rehabilitation. Unlike secondary prevention, which aims to prevent disability, the objective of tertiary prevention is to maximize the remaining capabilities and functions of an already disabled patient. 1. Goals of tertiary prevention include preventing pain and damage, halting progression and complications from disease, and restoring the health and functions of the individuals affected by disease. 39. For syphilitic patients, rehabilitation includes measures to prevent complete disability from the disease. such as implementing workplace adjustments for the blind and paralyzed or providing counseling to restore normal daily functions to the greatest extent possible. 1. The general use of machinery that has adequate ventilation and airflow is suggested for these patients in order to halt progression and complications of disease. A study conducted in nursing homes to prevent diseases concluded that the use of evaporative humidifiers to maintain the indoor humidity within the range 40 to 60% can reduce respiratory risk. Certain diseases thrive in different humidities, so the use of the humidifiers can help kill the particles of diseases. 38-37. Leading causes of preventable death. United States. The leading preventable cause of death in the United States is tobacco. However, poor diet and lack of exercise may soon surpass tobacco as a leading cause of death. These behaviors are modifiable and public health and prevention efforts could make a difference to reduce these deaths. 4. Leading causes of preventable deaths in the United States in 2004. Cause deaths caused % of all deaths. Tobacco smoking 435,000 18.1. Poor diet and physical inactivity 400,000 16.6. Alcohol consumption 85,000 3.5. Infectious diseases 75,000 3.1. Toxicants 55,000 2.3. Traffic collisions 43,000 1.8. Firearm incidents 29,000 1.2. Sexually transmitted infections 20,000 0.8. Drug abuse 17,000 0.7. Worldwide. The leading causes of preventable death worldwide share similar trends to the United States. There are a few differences between the two, such as malnutrition, pollution, and unsafe sanitation, that reflect health disparities between the developing and developed world. 40. Leading causes of preventable death worldwide as of the year 2001. 40. Cause deaths caused, millions per year. Hypertension 7.8. Smoking 5.0. High cholesterol 3.9. Malnutrition 3.8. Sexually transmitted infections 3.0. Poor diet 2.8. Overweight and obesity 2.5. Physical inactivity 2.0. Alcohol 1.9. Indoor air pollution from solid fuels 1.8. Unsafe water and poor sanitation 1.6. However, several of the leading causes of death, or underlying contributors to earlier death, may not be included as preventable causes of death. A study concluded that pollution was responsible for approximately 9 million deaths per year in 2019, 41, and another study concluded that the global mean loss of life expectancy, a measure similar to years of potential life lost from air pollution in 2015, was 2.9 years, substantially more than, for example, 0.3 years from all forms of direct violence, albeit a significant fraction of the LLE is considered to be unavoidable, such as pollution from some natural wildfires. 42. A landmark study conducted by the World Health Organization and the International Labour Organization found that exposure to long working hours is the occupational risk factor with the largest attributable burden of disease, i.e. an estimated 745,000 fatalities from ischemic heart disease and stroke events in 2016. 43. With this study, prevention of exposure to long working hours has emerged as a priority for prevention healthcare in workplace settings. Citation needed. Child mortality. In 2010, 7.6 million children died before reaching the age of 5. While this is a decrease from 9.6 million in 2044, it was still far from the fourth Millennium Development Goal to decrease child mortality by 2/3 by 2015. 45. Of these deaths, about 64% were due to infection including diarrhea, pneumonia, and malaria. 44. About 40% of these deaths occurred in neonates, children ages 1 to 28 days, due to preterm birth complications. 45. The highest number of child deaths occurred in Africa and Southeast Asia. 44. As of 2015 in Africa, almost no progress has been made in reducing neonatal deaths since 1990. 45. In 2010, India, Nigeria, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Pakistan, and China contributed to almost 50% of global child deaths. Targeting efforts in these countries is essential to reducing the global child death rate. 44. Child mortality is caused by factors including poverty, environmental hazards, and lack of maternal education. 46. In 2003, the World Health Organization created a list of interventions in the following table that were judged economically and operationally feasible. based on the healthcare resources and infrastructure in 42 nations that contribute to 90% of all infant and child deaths. The table indicates how many infant and child deaths could have been prevented in 2000, assuming universal healthcare coverage, 46. Leading preventive interventions as of 2003, reducing deaths in children 0 to 5 years old worldwide, 46. Intervention percent of all child deaths preventable. Breastfeeding 13. Insecticide-treated materials 7. Complementary feeding 6. Zinc 4. Clean delivery 4. HIV vaccine 4. Water, sanitation, hygiene 3. Antenatal steroids 3. Newborn temperature management 2. Vitamin A 2. Tetanus toxoid 2. Nevirapine and replacement feeding 2. Antibiotics for premature rupture of membranes 1. Measles vaccine 1. Anti-malarial intermittent preventive treatment in pregnancy less than 1%. Preventive methods. Obesity. Obesity is a major risk factor for a wide variety of conditions including cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, certain cancers, and type 2 diabetes. In order to prevent obesity, it is recommended that individuals adhere to a consistent exercise regimen as well as a nutritious and balanced diet. A healthy individual should aim for acquiring 10% of their energy from proteins, 15 to 20% from fat, and over 50% from complex carbohydrates, while avoiding alcohol as well as foods high in fat, salt, and sugar. 47. Sedentary adults should aim for at least half an hour of moderate-level daily physical activity and eventually increase to include at least 20 minutes of intense exercise, 3 times a week. 47. Preventive healthcare offers many benefits to those that chose to participate in taking an active role in the culture. The medical system in our society is geared toward curing acute symptoms of disease after the fact that they have brought us into the emergency room. An ongoing epidemic within American culture is the prevalence of obesity. Healthy eating and regular exercise play a significant role in reducing an individual's risk for type 2 diabetes. A 2008 study concluded that about 23.6 million people in the United States had diabetes, including 5.7 million that had not been diagnosed. 90 to 95% of people with diabetes have type 2 diabetes. Diabetes is the main cause of kidney failure, limb amputation, and new-onset blindness in American adults. 48. Sexually transmitted infections. U.S. propaganda poster Fool the Axis Use Prophylaxis, 1942. Sexually transmitted infections, STIs, such as syphilis and HIV, are common but preventable with safe sex practices. STIs can be asymptomatic or cause a range of symptoms. Preventive measures for STIs are called prophylactics. The term especially applies to the use of condoms, 49, which are highly effective at preventing disease, 50, but also to other devices meant to prevent STIs, 49, such as dental dams and latex gloves. Other means for preventing STIs include education on how to use condoms or other such barrier devices, testing partners before having unprotected sex, receiving regular STI screenings, to both receive treatment and prevent spreading STIs to partners, and, specifically for HIV, regularly taking prophylactic antiretroviral drugs, such as Truvada. Post-exposure prophylaxis, started within 72 hours, optimally less than 1 hour, after exposure to high-risk fluids, can also protect against HIV transmission. Citation needed. Malaria prevention using genetic modification. Genetically modified mosquitoes are being used in developing countries to control malaria. This approach has been subject to objections and controversy. 51. Thrombosis. Main article, Thrombosis prophylaxis. Thrombosis is a serious circulatory disease affecting thousands, usually older persons undergoing surgical procedures, women taking oral contraceptives and travelers. The consequences of thrombosis can be heart attacks and strokes. Prevention can include exercise, antiembolism stockings, pneumatic devices, and pharmacological treatments. Citation needed. Cancer. Main article, Cancer prevention. In recent years, when cancer has become a global problem, low and middle-income countries share a majority of the cancer burden, largely due to exposure to carcinogens resulting from industrialization and globalization. 52. However, primary prevention of cancer and knowledge of cancer risk factors can reduce over 1/3 of all cancer cases. Primary prevention of cancer can also prevent other diseases, both communicable and non-communicable, that share common risk factors with cancer. 52. Lung cancer. Distribution of lung cancer in the United States. Lung cancer is the leading cause of cancer-related deaths in the United States and Europe and is a major cause of death in other countries. 53. Tobacco is an environmental carcinogen and the major underlying cause of lung cancer. 53. Between 25% and 40% of all cancer deaths and about 90% of lung cancer cases are associated with tobacco use. Other carcinogens include asbestos and radioactive materials. 54. Both smoking and secondhand exposure from other smokers can lead to lung cancer and eventually death. 53. Prevention of tobacco use is paramount to prevention of lung cancer. Individual, community, and statewide interventions can prevent or cease tobacco use. 90% of adults in the U.S. who have ever smoked did so prior to the age of 20. In-school prevention/educational programs, as well as counseling resources, can help prevent and cease adolescent smoking. 54. Other cessation techniques include group support programs, nicotine replacement therapy, NRT, hypnosis, and self-motivated behavioral change. Studies have shown long-term success rates, greater than 1 year, of 20% for hypnosis and 10% to 20% for group therapy. 54. Cancer screening programs serve as effective sources of secondary prevention. The Mayo Clinic, Johns Hopkins, and Memorial Sloan Kettering hospitals conducted annual X-ray screenings and sputum cytology tests and found that lung cancer was detected at higher rates, earlier stages, and had more favorable treatment outcomes, which supports widespread investment in such programs. 54. Legislation can also affect smoking prevention and cessation. In 1992, Massachusetts, United States, voters passed a bill adding an extra 25-cent tax to each pack of cigarettes, despite intense lobbying and $7.3 million spent by the tobacco industry to oppose this bill. Tax revenue goes toward tobacco education and control programs and has led to a decline of tobacco use in the state. 55. Lung cancer and tobacco smoking are increasing worldwide, especially in China. China is responsible for about 1/3 of the global consumption and production of tobacco products. 56. Tobacco control policies have been ineffective as China is home to 350 million regular smokers and 750 million passive smokers and the annual death toll is over 1 million. 56. Recommended actions to reduce tobacco use include decreasing tobacco supply, increasing tobacco taxes, widespread educational campaigns, decreasing advertising from the tobacco industry, and increasing tobacco cessation support resources. 56. In Wuhan, China, a 1998 school-based program implemented an anti-tobacco curriculum for adolescents and reduced the number of regular smokers, though it did not significantly decrease the number of adolescents who initiated smoking. This program was therefore effective in secondary but not primary prevention and shows that school-based programs have the potential to reduce tobacco use. 57. Skin cancer. An image of melanoma, one of the deadliest forms of skin cancer. Skin cancer is the most common cancer in the United States. 58. The most lethal form of skin cancer, melanoma, leads to over 50,000 annual deaths in the United States. 58. Childhood prevention is particularly important because a significant portion of ultraviolet radiation exposure from the sun occurs during childhood and adolescence and can subsequently lead to skin cancer in adulthood. Furthermore, childhood prevention can lead to the development of healthy habits that continue to prevent cancer for a lifetime. 58. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, recommends several primary prevention methods including limiting sun exposure between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m., when the sun is strongest, wearing tighter weave natural cotton clothing, wide brim hats, and sunglasses as protective covers, using sunscreens that protect against both UVA and UVB rays, and avoiding tanning salons. 58. Sunscreen should be reapplied after sweating, exposure to water, through swimming for example, or after several hours of sun exposure. 58. Since skin cancer is very preventable, the CDC recommends school-level prevention programs including preventive curricula, family involvement, participation and support from the school's health services, and partnership with community, state, and national agencies and organizations to keep children away from excessive UV radiation exposure. 58. Most skin cancer and sun protection data comes from Australia and the United States. 59. An international study reported that Australians tended to demonstrate higher knowledge of sun protection and skin cancer knowledge, compared to other countries. 59, of children, adolescents, and adults, sunscreen was the most commonly used skin protection. However, many adolescents purposely used sunscreen with a low sun protection factor, SPF, in order to get a tan. 59. Various Australian studies have shown that many adults failed to use sunscreen correctly. Many applied sunscreen well after their initial sun exposure and or failed to reapply when necessary. 60, 61, 62. A 2002 case control study in Brazil showed that only 3% of case participants and 11% of control participants used sunscreen with SPF 15. 63. Cervical cancer. The presence of cancer, adenocarcinoma, detected on a Pap test. Cervical cancer ranks among the top 3 most common cancers among women in Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and parts of Asia. Cervical cytology screening aims to detect abnormal lesions in the cervix so that women can undergo treatment prior to the development of cancer. Given that high-quality screening and follow-up care has been shown to reduce cervical cancer rates by up to 80%, most developed countries now encourage sexually active women to undergo a Pap test every 3 to 5 years. Finland and Iceland have developed effective organized programs with routine monitoring and have managed to significantly reduce cervical cancer mortality while using fewer resources than unorganized, opportunistic programs such as those in the United States or Canada. 64. In developing nations in Latin America, such as Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, and Cuba, both public and privately organized programs have offered women routine cytological screening since the 1970s. However, these efforts have not resulted in a significant change in cervical cancer incidence or mortality in these nations. This is likely due to low-quality, inefficient testing. However, Puerto Rico, which has offered early screening since the 1960s, has witnessed almost a 50% decline in cervical cancer incidence and almost a 4-fold decrease in mortality between 1950 and 1990. Brazil, Peru, India, and several high-risk nations in sub-Saharan Africa which lack organized screening programs, have a high incidence of cervical cancer. 64. Colorectal cancer. Colorectal cancer is globally the second most common cancer in women and the third most common in men. 65. And the fourth most common cause of cancer death after lung, stomach, and liver cancer. 66, having caused 715,000 deaths in 2010. 67. It is also highly preventable. About 80%, 68, of colorectal cancers begin as benign growths, commonly called polyps, which can be easily detected and removed during a colonoscopy. Other methods of screening for polyps and cancers include fecal occult blood testing. Lifestyle changes that may reduce the risk of colorectal cancer include increasing consumption of whole grains, fruits and vegetables, and reducing consumption of red meat. Citation needed. Health disparities and barriers to accessing care. Access to healthcare and preventive health services is unequal, as is the quality of care received. A study conducted by the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, AHRQ, revealed health disparities in the United States. In the United States, elderly adults, greater than 65 years old, received worse care and had less access to care than their younger counterparts. The same trends are seen when comparing all racial minorities, Black, Hispanic, Asian, to white patients, and low-income people to high-income people. 69. Common barriers to accessing and utilizing healthcare resources included lack of income and education, language barriers, and lack of health insurance. Minorities were less likely than whites to possess health insurance, as were individuals who completed less education. These disparities made it more difficult for the disadvantaged groups to have regular access to a primary care provider, receive immunizations, or receive other types of medical care. 69. Additionally, uninsured people tend to not seek care until their diseases progress to chronic and serious states, and they are also more likely to forego necessary tests, treatments, and filling prescription medications. 70. These sorts of disparities and barriers exist worldwide as well. Often, there are decades of gaps in life expectancy between developing and developed countries. For example, Japan has an average life expectancy that is 36 years greater than that in Malawi. 71. Low-income countries also tend to have fewer physicians than high-income countries. In Nigeria and Myanmar, there are fewer than 4 physicians per 100,000 people, while Norway and Switzerland have a ratio that is tenfold higher. 71. Common barriers worldwide include lack of availability of health services and healthcare providers in the region, great physical distance between the home and health service facilities, high transportation costs, high treatment costs, and social norms and stigma toward accessing certain health services. 72. Economics of lifestyle-based prevention. With lifestyle factors such as diet and exercise rising to the top of preventable death statistics, the economics of healthy lifestyle is a growing concern. There is little question that positive lifestyle choices provide an investment in health throughout life. 73. To gauge success, traditional measures such as the quality years of life method, (QALY), show great value. 74. However, that method does not account for the cost of chronic conditions or future lost earnings because of poor health. 75. Developing future economic models that would guide both private and public investments as well as drive future policy to evaluate the efficacy of positive lifestyle choices on health is a major topic for economists globally. Americans spend over $3 trillion a year on health care but have a higher rate of infant mortality, shorter life expectancies, and a higher rate of diabetes than other high-income nations because of negative lifestyle choices. 76. Despite these large costs, very little is spent on prevention for lifestyle-caused conditions in comparison. In 2016, the Journal of the American Medical Association estimated that $101 billion was spent in 2013 on the preventable disease of diabetes, and another $88 billion was spent on heart disease. 77. In an effort to encourage healthy lifestyle choices. As of 2010, workplace wellness programs were on the rise, but the economics and effectiveness data were continuing to evolve and develop. 78. Health insurance coverage impacts lifestyle choices. Even intermittent loss of coverage had negative effects on healthy choices in the U.S. 79. The repeal of the Affordable Care Act, ACA, could significantly impact coverage for many Americans as well as the Prevention and Public Health Fund, which is the U.S. first and only mandatory funding stream dedicated to improving public health. 80. Including counseling on lifestyle prevention issues, such as weight management, alcohol use, and treatment. For depression. 81. Because in the U.S. chronic illnesses predominate as a cause of death and pathways for treating chronic illnesses are complex and multifaceted, prevention is a best practice approach to chronic disease when possible. In many cases, prevention requires mapping complex pathways. 82. To determine the ideal point for intervention. Cost-effectiveness of prevention is achievable, but impacted by the length of time it takes to see effects/outcomes of intervention. This makes prevention efforts difficult to fund, particularly in strained financial contexts. Prevention potentially creates other costs as well, due to extending the lifespan and thereby increasing opportunities for illness. In order to assess the cost-effectiveness of prevention, the cost of the preventive measure, savings from avoiding morbidity, and the cost from extending the lifespan need to be considered. 83. Life extension costs become smaller when accounting for savings from postponing the last year of life. 84. Which makes up a large fraction of lifetime medical expenditures. 85. And becomes cheaper with age. 86. Prevention leads to savings only if the cost of the preventive measure is less than the savings from avoiding morbidity net of the cost of extending the lifespan. In order to establish reliable economics of prevention for illnesses that are complicated in origin, knowing how best to assess prevention efforts, i.e. developing useful measures and appropriate scope, is required. 87. Effectiveness. There is no general consensus as to whether or not preventive healthcare measures are cost-effective, according to whom, but they increase the quality of life dramatically. There are varying views on what constitutes a good investment. Some argue that preventive health measures should save more money than they cost, when factoring in treatment costs in the absence of such measures. 11. Others have argued in favor of good value or conferring significant health benefits even if the measures do not save money. 88. Furthermore, preventive health services are often described as one entity, though they comprise a myriad of different services, each of which can individually lead to net costs, savings, or neither. Greater differentiation of these services is necessary to fully understand both the financial and health effects. 11. A 2010 study reported that in the United States, vaccinating children, cessation of smoking, daily prophylactic use of aspirin, and screening of breast and colorectal cancers had the most potential to prevent premature death. 11. Preventive health measures that resulted in savings included vaccinating children and adults, smoking cessation, daily use of aspirin, and screening for issues with alcoholism, obesity, and vision failure. 11. These authors estimated that if usage of these services in the United States increased to 90% of the population, there would be net savings of $3.7 billion, which comprised only about -0.2% of the total 2006 United States healthcare expenditure. 11. Despite the potential for decreasing healthcare spending, utilization of healthcare resources in the United States still remains low, especially among Latinos and African Americans. 89. Overall, preventive services are difficult to implement because healthcare providers have limited time with patients and must integrate a variety of preventive health measures from different sources. 89. While these specific services bring about small net savings, not every preventive health measure saves more than it costs. A 1970s study showed that preventing heart attacks by treating hypertension early on with drugs actually did not save money in the long run. The money saved by evading treatment from heart attack and stroke only amounted to about a quarter of the cost of the drugs. 90. 91. Similarly, it was found that the cost of drugs or dietary changes to decrease high blood cholesterol exceeded the cost of subsequent heart disease treatment. 92. 93. Due to these findings, some argue that rather than focusing healthcare reform efforts exclusively on preventive care, the interventions that bring about the highest level of health should be prioritized. 88. In 2008, Cohen et al. Outlined a few arguments made by skeptics of preventive healthcare. Many argue that preventive measures only cost less than future treatment when the proportion of the population that would become ill in the absence of prevention is fairly large. 12. The Diabetes Prevention Program Research Group conducted a 2012 study evaluating the costs and benefits in quality-adjusted life years or QALYs of lifestyle changes versus taking the drug metformin. They found that neither method brought about financial savings, but were cost-effective nonetheless because they brought about an increase in QALYs. 94. In addition to scrutinizing costs, preventive healthcare skeptics also examine efficiency of interventions. They argue that while many treatments of existing diseases involve use of advanced equipment and technology, in some cases, this is a more efficient use of resources than attempts to prevent the disease. 12. Cohen suggested that the preventive measures most worth exploring and investing in are those that could benefit a large portion of the population to bring about cumulative and widespread health benefits at a reasonable cost. 12. Cost-effectiveness of childhood obesity interventions. There are at least 4 nationally implemented childhood obesity interventions in the United States: the Sugar-Sweetened Beverage Excise Tax, SSB, the TVAD program, Active Physical Education, Active PE, policies, and Early Care and Education, ECE, policies. 95. They each have similar goals of reducing childhood obesity. The effects of these interventions on BMI have been studied, and the cost-effectiveness analysis, CEA, has led to a better understanding of projected cost reductions and improved health outcomes. 96. 97. The Childhood Obesity Intervention Cost-Effectiveness Study, Choices, was conducted to evaluate and compare the CEA of these 4 interventions. 95. Gortmaker, S.L. et al., 2015, states, the 4 initial interventions were selected by the investigators to represent a broad range of nationally scalable strategies to reduce childhood obesity using a mix of both policy and programmatic strategies. 1. An excise tax of 1 cent per ounce of sweetened beverages, applied nationally and administered at the state level, SSB. 2. Elimination of the tax deductibility of advertising costs of TV advertisements for nutritionally poor foods and beverages seen by children and adolescents, TVAD. 3. State policy requiring all public elementary schools in which physical education, PE, is currently provided to devote greater than or equal to 50% of PE class time to moderate and vigorous physical activity, active PE. And 4. State policy to make early child educational settings healthier by increasing physical activity, improving nutrition, and reducing screen time, ECE. The choices found that SSB, TVAD, and ECE led to net cost savings. Both SSB and TVAD increased quality-adjusted life years and produced yearly tax revenue of $12.5 billion and $80 million, respectively. Citation needed. Some challenges with evaluating the effectiveness of child obesity interventions include: the economic consequences of childhood obesity are both short and long-term. In the short term, obesity impairs cognitive achievement and academic performance. Some believe this is secondary to negative effects on mood or energy, but others suggest there may be physiological factors involved. 98. Furthermore, obese children have increased health care expenses, e.g. medications, acute care visits. In the long term, obese children tend to become obese adults with associated increased risk for a chronic condition such as diabetes or hypertension. 99, 100. Any effect on their cognitive development may also affect their contributions to society and socioeconomic status. In the choices, it was noted that translating the effects of these interventions may in fact differ among communities throughout the nation. In addition, it was suggested that limited outcomes are studied and these interventions may have an additional effect that is not fully appreciated. Modeling outcomes in such interventions in children over the long term is challenging because advances in medicine and medical technology are unpredictable. The projections from cost-effective analysis may need to be reassessed more frequently. Economics of U.S. preventive care. As of 2009, the cost-effectiveness of preventive care is a highly debated topic. While some economists argue that preventive care is valuable and potentially cost-saving, others believe it is an inefficient waste of resources. 101. Preventive care is composed of a variety of clinical services and programs including annual doctor's checkups, annual immunizations, and wellness programs. Recent models show that these simple interventions can have significant economic impacts. 74. Clinical preventive services and programs. Research on preventive care addresses the question of whether it is cost-saving or cost-effective and whether there is an economics evidence base for health promotion and disease prevention. The need for and interest in preventive care is driven by the imperative to reduce healthcare costs while improving quality of care and the patient experience. Preventive care can lead to improved health outcomes and cost savings potential. Services such as health assessments/screenings, prenatal care, and telehealth and telemedicine can reduce morbidity or mortality with low cost or cost savings. 102, 103. Specifically, health assessments/screenings have cost savings potential, with varied cost effectiveness based on screening and assessment type. 104. Inadequate prenatal care can lead to an increased risk of prematurity, stillbirth, and infant death. 105. Time is the ultimate resource and preventive care can help mitigate the time costs. 106. Telehealth and telemedicine is one option that has gained consumer interest, acceptance, and confidence and can improve quality of care and patient satisfaction. 107. 108. Economics for investment. There are benefits and trade-offs when considering investment in preventive care versus other types of clinical services. Preventive care can be a good investment as supported by the evidence base and can drive population health management objectives. 12. 103. The concepts of cost-saving and cost-effectiveness are different and both are relevant to preventive care. Preventive care that may not save money may still provide health benefits, thus, there is a need to compare interventions relative to impact on health and cost. 109. Preventive care transcends demographics and is applicable to people of every age. The health capital theory underpins the importance of preventive care across the life cycle and provides a framework for understanding the variances in health and health care that are experienced. It treats health as a stock that provides direct utility. Health depreciates with age and the aging process can be countered through health investments. The theory further supports that individuals demand good health, that the demand for health investment is a derived demand, i.e. investment is health is due to the underlying demand for good health, and the efficiency of the health investment process increases with knowledge, i.e. it is assumed that the more educated are more efficient consumers and producers of health. 110. The prevalence elasticity of demand for prevention can also provide insights into the economics. Demand for preventive care can alter the prevalence rate of a given disease and further reduce or even reverse any further growth of prevalence. 106. Reduction in prevalence subsequently leads to reduction in costs. There are a number of organizations and policy actions that are relevant when discussing the economics of preventive care services. The evidence base, viewpoints, and policy briefs from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, and efforts by the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, USPSTF, all provide examples that improve the health and well-being of populations, e.g. preventive health assessments/screenings, prenatal care, and telehealth/telemedicine. The Affordable Care Act, ACA, has major influence on the provision of preventive care services, although it is currently under heavy scrutiny and review by the new administration. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, the ACA makes preventive care affordable and accessible through mandatory coverage of preventive services without a deductible, copayment, coinsurance, or other cost sharing. 111. The U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, USPSTF, a panel of national experts in prevention and evidence-based medicine, works to improve health of Americans by making evidence-based recommendations about clinical preventive services. 112. They do not consider the cost of a preventive service when determining a recommendation. Each year, the organization delivers a report to Congress that identifies critical evidence gaps in research and recommends priority areas for further review. 113. The National Network of Perinatal Quality Collaboratives, NNPQC, sponsored by the CDC, supports state-based perinatal quality collaboratives, PQCs, in measuring and improving upon health care and health outcomes for mothers and babies. These PQCs have contributed to improvements such as reduction in deliveries before 39 weeks, reductions in healthcare-associated bloodstream infections, and improvements in the utilization of antenatal corticosteroids. 114. Telehealth and telemedicine has realized significant growth and development recently. The Center for Connected Health Policy, the National Telehealth Policy Resource Center, has produced multiple reports and policy briefs on the topic of telehealth and telemedicine and how they contribute to preventive services. 115. Policy actions and provision of preventive services do not guarantee utilization. Reimbursement has remained a significant barrier to adoption due to variances in payer and state-level reimbursement policies and guidelines through government and commercial payers. Americans use preventive services at about half the recommended rate, and cost sharing, such as deductibles, coinsurance, or copayments, also reduce the likelihood that preventive services will be used. 111. Despite the ACA's enhancement of Medicare benefits and preventive services, there were no effects on preventive service utilization, calling out the fact that other fundamental barriers exist. 11. Affordable Care Act and Preventive Health Care. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, also known as just the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, was passed and became law in the United States on March 23, 2010. 117. The finalized and newly ratified law was to address many issues in the U.S. healthcare system, which included expansion of coverage, insurance market reforms, better quality, and the forecast of efficiency and costs. 118. Under the insurance market reforms, the Act required that insurance companies no longer exclude people with pre-existing conditions, allow for children to be covered on their parents' plan until the age of 26, and expand appeals that dealt with reimbursement denials. The Affordable Care Act also banned the limited coverage imposed by health insurances, and insurance companies were to include coverage for preventive health care services. 119. The U.S. Preventive Services Task Force has categorized and rated preventive health services as either A or B, as to which insurance companies must comply and present full coverage. Not only has the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force provided graded preventive health services that are appropriate for coverage, they have also provided many recommendations to clinicians and insurers to promote better preventive care to ultimately provide better quality of care and lower the burden of costs. 120. Health insurance. Healthcare insurance companies are willing to pay for preventive care despite the fact that patients are not acutely sick and hope that it will prevent them from developing a chronic disease later on in life. 121. Today, health insurance plans offered through the marketplace, mandated by the Affordable Care Act, are required to provide certain preventive care services free of charge to patients. Section 2713 of the Affordable Care Act, 122, specifies that all private marketplace and all employer-sponsored private plans, except those grandfathered in, are required to cover preventive care services that are ranked A or B by the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force free of charge to patients. 123. 124. United Healthcare Insurance Company has published patient guidelines at the beginning of the year explaining their preventive care coverage. 125. Evaluating incremental benefits. Evaluating the incremental benefits of preventive care requires a longer period of time when compared to acutely ill patients. Inputs into the model such as discounting rate and time horizon can have significant effects on the results. One controversial subject is use of a 10-year time frame to assess cost-effectiveness of diabetes preventive services by the Congressional Budget Office. 126. Preventive care services mainly focus on chronic disease. 127. the Congressional Budget Office has provided guidance that further research is needed in the area of the economic impacts of obesity in the U.S. before the CBO can estimate budgetary consequences. A bipartisan report published in May 2015 recognizes the potential of preventive care to improve patients' health at individual and population levels while decreasing the healthcare expenditure. 128. Economic case. Mortality from modifiable risk factors. Chronic diseases such as heart disease, stroke, diabetes, obesity and cancer have become the most common and costly health problems in the United States. In 2014, it was projected that by 2023 that the number of chronic disease cases would increase by 42%, resulting in $4.2 trillion in treatment and lost economic output. 129. They are also among the top 10 leading causes of mortality. 130. Chronic diseases are driven by risk factors that are largely preventable. Sub-analysis performed on all deaths in the United States in 2000 revealed that almost half were attributed to preventable behaviors including tobacco, poor diet, physical inactivity and alcohol consumption. More recent analysis reveals that heart disease and cancer alone accounted for nearly 46% of all deaths. 131. Modifiable risk factors are also responsible for a large morbidity burden, resulting in poor quality of life in the present and loss of future life-earning years. It is further estimated that by 2023, focused efforts on the prevention and treatment of chronic disease may result in 40 million fewer chronic disease cases, potentially reducing treatment costs by $220 billion. 129. Childhood vaccinations. Childhood immunizations are largely responsible for the increase in life expectancy in the 20th century. From an economic standpoint, childhood vaccines demonstrate a very high return on investment. According to Healthy People 2020, for every birth cohort that receives the routine childhood vaccination schedule, direct healthcare costs are reduced by $9.9 billion and society saves $33.4 billion in indirect costs. 132. The economic benefits of childhood vaccination extend beyond individual patients to insurance plans and vaccine manufacturers, all while improving the health of the population. 133. Health capital theory. The burden of preventable illness extends beyond the healthcare sector, incurring costs related to lost productivity among workers in the workforce. Indirect costs related to poor health behaviors and associated chronic disease costs U.S. employers billions of dollars each year. Citation needed. According to the American Diabetes Association, ADA, 134, medical costs for employees with diabetes are twice as high as for workers without diabetes and are caused by work-related absenteeism, $5 billion, reduced productivity at work, $20.8 billion, inability to work due to illness-related disability, $21.6 billion, and premature mortality, $18.5 billion. Reported estimates of the cost burden due to increasingly high levels of overweight and obese members in the workforce vary. 135, with best estimates suggesting 450 million more missed work days, resulting in $153 billion each year in lost productivity, according to the CDC Healthy Workforce. 136. The health capital model explains how individual investments in health can increase earnings by increasing the number of healthy days available to work and to earn income. 137. In this context, health can be treated both as a consumption good, wherein individuals desire health because it improves quality of life in the present, and as an investment good because of its potential to increase attendance and workplace productivity over time. Preventive health behaviors such as healthful diet, regular exercise, access to and use of well care, avoiding tobacco, and limiting alcohol can be viewed as health inputs that result in both a healthier workforce and substantial cost savings. Citation needed. Quality-adjusted life years. Health benefits of preventive care measures can be described in terms of quality-adjusted life years, QALYs, saved. A QALY takes into account length and quality of life, and is used to evaluate the cost-effectiveness of medical and preventive interventions. Classically, 1 year of perfect health is defined as 1 QALY, and a year with any degree of less than perfect health is assigned a value between 0 and 1 QALY. 138. As an economic weighting system, the QALY can be used to inform personal decisions, to evaluate preventive interventions and to set priorities for future preventive efforts. Citation needed. Cost-saving and cost-effective benefits of preventive care measures are well established. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation evaluated the prevention cost-effectiveness literature and found that many preventive measures meet the benchmark of less than $100,000 per kale and are considered to be favorably cost-effective. These include screenings for HIV and chlamydia, cancers of the colon, breast and cervix, vision screening, and screening for abdominal aortic aneurysms in men greater than 60 in certain populations. Alcohol and tobacco screening were found to be cost-saving in some reviews and cost-effective in others. According to the RWJF analysis, 2 preventive interventions were found to save costs in all reviews: childhood immunizations and counseling adults on the use of aspirin, 139. Minority populations. Health disparities are increasing in the United States for chronic diseases such as obesity, diabetes, cancer, and cardiovascular disease. Populations at heightened risk for health inequities are the growing proportion of racial and ethnic minorities, including African Americans, American Indians, Hispanics/Latinos, Asian Americans, Alaska Natives and Pacific Islanders, 140. According to the Racial and Ethnic Approaches to Community Health, REACH, a national CDC program, non-Hispanic Blacks currently have the highest rates of obesity, 48%, and risk of newly diagnosed diabetes is 77% higher among non-Hispanic Blacks, 66% higher among Hispanics/Latinos and 18% higher among Asian Americans compared to non-Hispanic whites. Current U.S. population projections predict that more than half of Americans will belong to a minority group by 2044, 141. Without targeted preventive interventions, medical costs from chronic disease inequities will become unsustainable. Broadening health policies designed to improve delivery of preventive services for minority populations may help reduce substantial medical costs caused by inequities in health care, resulting in a return on investment. Citation needed. Policies. See also, health policy. Chronic disease is a population-level issue that requires population health-level efforts and national and state-level public policy to effectively prevent, rather than individual-level efforts. The United States currently employs many public health policy efforts aligned with the preventive health efforts discussed above. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention support initiatives such as Health in All Policies and HI5, Health Impact in 5 Years, and collaborative efforts that aim to consider prevention across sectors, 142, and address social determinants of health as a method of primary prevention for chronic disease, 143. Obesity. Policies that address the obesity epidemic should be proactive and far-reaching, including a variety of stakeholders both in healthcare and in other sectors. Recommendations from the Institute of Medicine in 2012 suggest that concerted action be taken across and within 5 environments: physical activity, PA, food and beverage, marketing and messaging, healthcare and work sites, and schools, and all sectors of society, including government, business and industry, schools, child care, urban planning, recreation, transportation, media, public health, agriculture, communities, and home, in order for obesity prevention efforts to truly be successful. 144. There are dozens of current policies acting at either, or all of, the federal, state, local and school levels. Most states employ a physical education requirement of 150 minutes of physical education per week at school, a policy of the National Association of Sport and Physical Education. In some cities, including Philadelphia, a sugary food tax is employed. This is a part of an amendment to Title 19 of the Philadelphia Code, Finance, Taxes and Collections, Chapter 19 to 4100, sugar-sweetened beverage tax that was approved 2016, which establishes an excise tax of $0.015 per fluid ounce on distributors of beverages sweetened with both caloric and non-caloric sweeteners. 145. Distributors are required to file a return with the department, and the department can collect taxes, among other responsibilities. These policies can be a source of tax credits. Under the Philadelphia policy, businesses can apply for tax credits with the Revenue Department on a first-come, first-served basis. This applies until the total amount of credits for a particular year reaches $1 million. 146. Recently, advertisements for food and beverages directed at children have received much attention. The Children's Food and Beverage Advertising Initiative, CFBAI, is a self-regulatory program of the food industry. Each participating company makes a public pledge that details its commitment to advertise only foods that meet certain nutritional criteria to children under 12 years old. 147. This is a self-regulated program with policies written by the Council of Better Business Bureaus. The Robert Wood Johnson Foundation funded research to test the efficacy of the CFBAI. The results showed progress in terms of decreased advertising of food products that target children and adolescents. 148. Childhood immunization policies. Despite nationwide controversies over childhood vaccination and immunization, there are policies and programs at the federal, state, local and school levels outlining vaccination requirements. All states require children to be vaccinated against certain communicable diseases as a condition for school attendance. However, only 18 states allow exemptions for philosophical or moral reasons. Diseases for which vaccinations form part of the standard ACIP vaccination schedule are diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, whooping cough, poliomyelitis, polio, measles, mumps, rubella, Haemophilus influenza type B, hepatitis B, influenza, and pneumococcal infections. 149. The CDC website maintains such schedules. 150. The CDC website describes a federally funded program, Vaccines for Children, VFC, which provides vaccines at no cost to children who might not otherwise be vaccinated because of inability to pay. Additionally, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, ACIP, is an expert vaccination advisory board that informs vaccination policy and guides ongoing recommendations to the CDC, incorporating the most up-to-date cost-effectiveness and risk-benefit evidence in its recommendations. 151. See also. Icon Medicine Portal. Urban Green Space #Impact on Health. Chemoprevention. Consumer Protection. Effects of Climate Change on Human Health. Health Security. Genetic Modifications Preventing Diseases. Epigenetics. Mental Illness Prevention. Pandemic Prevention. Public Health. Pre-exposure prophylaxis. Preparedness. Preventive and social medicine. Primary health care. Pollution prevention. Disambiguation. Sick building syndrome. Treatment as prevention. Journals and organizations. American Board of Preventive Medicine. American Journal of Preventive Medicine. American Osteopathic Board of Preventive Medicine. Preventive Medicine, Journal. A therapy or medical treatment, both words, treatment and therapy, are often abbreviated TX, or TX, is the attempted remediation of a health problem, usually following a medical diagnosis. As a rule, each therapy has indications and contraindications. There are many different types of therapy. Not all therapies are effective. Many therapies can produce unwanted adverse effects. Medical treatment and therapy are generally considered synonyms. However, in the context of mental health, the term therapy may refer specifically to psychotherapy. History. Icon. This section needs expansion. You can help by adding to it. July 2021. Before the creating of therapy as a formal procedure, people told stories to one another to inform and assist about the world. 1. The term healing through words was used over 3,500 years ago in Greek and Egyptian writing. 2. The term psychotherapy was invented in the 19th century. 3. And psychoanalysis was founded by Sigmund Freud under a decade later. Semantic field. The words care, therapy, treatment, and intervention overlap in a semantic field, and thus they can be synonymous depending on context. Moving rightward through that order, the connotative level of holism decreases and the level of specificity, to concrete instances, increases. Thus, in healthcare contexts, where its senses are always non-count, the word care tends to imply a broad idea of everything done to protect or improve someone's health, for example, as in the terms preventive care and primary care, which connote ongoing action, although it sometimes implies a narrower idea, for example, in the simplest cases of wound care or post-anesthesia care, a few particular steps are sufficient, and the patient's interaction with that provider is soon finished. In contrast, the word intervention tends to be specific and concrete, and thus the word is often countable. For example, one instance of cardiac catheterization is one intervention performed, and coronary care, non-count, can require a series of interventions, count. At the extreme, the piling on of such countable interventions amounts to interventionism, a flawed model of care lacking holistic circumspection, merely treating discrete problems, in billable increments, rather than maintaining health. Therapy and treatment, in the middle of the semantic field, can connote either the holism of care or the discreteness of intervention, with context conveying the intent in each use. Accordingly, they can be used in both non-count and count senses. For example, therapy for chronic kidney disease can involve several dialysis treatments per week. The words aciology and iamatology are obscure and obsolete synonyms referring to the study of therapies. The English word therapy comes via Latin therapia from Greek, theta epsilon rho alpha pi epsilon alpha, and literally means curing or healing. 4. Types of therapies. Therapy comes in many different forms, and may target mental or physical problems. These types of therapy include cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, and physical therapy. 5. Therapists are used daily by many people, and are trained to provide treatment to an individual or group. 6. Therapy was invented in the 1800s by Franz Mesmer, considered the father of Western psychotherapy. 6. Who was followed by Sigmund Freud. 5. Therapy is used in many ways to shape and help reform a person. This type of treatment allows individuals to regain standards or goals which would be beneficial or which have been lost. Many individuals come into therapy looking for ways to cope with issues and to receive an emotional release. For example, therapy can assist people who are healing from trauma, in need of support, dealing with emotional baggage, or struggling with other issues. 7. The therapeutic process, the process of being allowed to freely express thoughts and feelings, greatly assists in recovery. 8. Psychology session. By chronology, priority, or intensity. Levels of care. Levels of care classify healthcare into categories of chronology, priority, or intensity, as follows. Emergency care handles medical emergencies and is a first point of contact or intake for less serious problems, which can be referred to other levels of care as appropriate. Intensive care, also called critical care, is care for extremely ill or injured patients. It thus requires high resource intensity, knowledge, and skill, as well as quick decision-making. Ambulatory care is care provided on an outpatient basis. Typically, patients can walk into and out of the clinic under their own power, hence ambulatory, usually on the same day. Home care is care at home, including care from providers, such as physicians, nurses, and home health aides, making house calls, care from caregivers such as family members, and patient self-care. Primary care is meant to be the main kind of care in general, and ideally a medical home that unifies care across referred providers. Secondary care is care provided by medical specialists and other health professionals who generally do not have first contact with patients, for example, cardiologists, urologists, and dermatologists. A patient reaches secondary care as a next step from primary care, typically by provider referral, although sometimes by patient self-initiative. Tertiary care is specialized consultative care, usually for inpatients and on referral from a primary or secondary health professional, in a facility that has personnel and facilities for advanced medical investigation and treatment, such as a tertiary referral hospital. Follow-up care is additional care during or after convalescence. Aftercare is generally synonymous with follow-up care. End-of-life care is care near the end of one's life. It often includes the following. Palliative care is supportive care, most especially, but not necessarily, near the end of life. Hospice care is palliative care very near the end of life when cure is very unlikely. Its main goal is comfort, both physical and mental. Lines of therapy. Treatment decisions often follow formal or informal algorithmic guidelines. Treatment options can often be ranked or prioritized into lines of therapy, first-line therapy, second-line therapy, third-line therapy, and so on. First-line therapy, sometimes referred to as induction therapy, primary therapy, or frontline therapy. 9, is the first therapy that will be tried. Its priority over other options is usually either 1. Formally recommended on the basis of clinical trial evidence for its best available combination of efficacy, safety, and tolerability, or 2. Chosen based on the clinical experience of the physician. If a first-line therapy either fails to resolve the issue or produces intolerable side effects, additional, second-line therapies may be substituted or added to the treatment regimen, followed by third-line therapies, and so on. An example of a context in which the formalization of treatment algorithms and the ranking of lines of therapy is very extensive is chemotherapy regimens. Because of the great difficulty in successfully treating some forms of cancer, one line after another may be tried. In oncology, the count of therapy lines may reach 10 or even 20. Often multiple therapies may be tried simultaneously, combination therapy or polytherapy. Thus combination chemotherapy is also called polychemotherapy, whereas chemotherapy with one agent at a time is called single-agent therapy or monotherapy. Adjuvant therapy is therapy given in addition to the primary, main, or initial treatment, but simultaneously, as opposed to second-line therapy. Neoadjuvant therapy is therapy that is begun before the main therapy. Thus one can consider surgical excision of a tumor as the first-line therapy for a certain type and stage of cancer even though radiotherapy is used before it. The radiotherapy is neoadjuvant, chronologically first but not primary in the sense of the main event. Premedication is conceptually not far from this, but the words are not interchangeable. Cytotoxic drugs to put a tumor on the ropes before surgery delivers the knockout punch are called neoadjuvant chemotherapy, not premedication, whereas things like anesthetics or prophylactic antibiotics before dental surgery are called premedication. Step therapy or stepladder therapy is a specific type of prioritization by lines of therapy. It is controversial in American health care because unlike conventional decision-making about what constitutes first-line, second-line, and third-line therapy, which in the U.S. reflects safety and efficacy first and cost only according to the patient's wishes, step therapy attempts to mix cost containment by someone other than the patient, third-party payers, into the algorithm. Therapy freedom and the negotiation between individual and group rights are involved. By intent. Therapy type description. Abortive therapy, a therapy that is intended to stop a medical condition from progressing any further. A medication taken at the earliest signs of a disease, such as an analgesic taken at the very first symptoms of a migraine headache to prevent it from getting worse, is an abortive therapy. Compare abortifacients, which abort a pregnancy. Bridge therapy, a therapy that figuratively provides a bridge to another step or phase, crossing over some immediate chasm, challenge, in contrast with destination therapy, which is the final therapy in cases where clinically appropriate. Consolidation therapy, a therapy given to consolidate the gains from induction therapy. In cancer, this means chasing after any malignant cells that may be left. Curative therapy, a therapy with curative intent, that is, one that seeks to cure the root cause of a disorder. Also called etiotropic therapy. Definitive therapy, a therapy that may be final, superior to others, curative, or all of those. Destination therapy, a therapy that is the final destination rather than a bridge to another therapy. Usually refers to ventricular assist devices to keep the existing heart going, not just until heart transplantation can occur, but for the rest of the patient's life expectancy. Empiric therapy, a therapy given on an empiric basis, that is, one given according to a clinician's educated guess despite uncertainty about the illness's causative factors. For example, empiric antibiotic therapy administers a broad-spectrum antibiotic immediately on the basis of a good chance, given the history, physical examination findings, and risk factors present, that the illness is bacterial and will respond to that drug, even though the bacterial species or variant is not yet known. Gold standard therapy, a therapy that is definitive, just as a gold standard diagnostic test is a definitive test. Investigational therapy and experimental therapy. Use of experimental therapies must be ethically justified, because by definition they raise the question of standard of care. Physicians have autonomy to provide empirical care, such as off-label care, according to their experience and clinical judgment, but the autonomy has limits that preclude quackery. Thus it may be necessary to design a clinical trial around the new therapy and to use the therapy only per a formal protocol. Sometimes shorthand phrases such as treated on protocol imply not just treated according to a plan but specifically treated with investigational therapy. Maintenance therapy, a therapy taken during disease remission to prevent relapse. Palliative therapy, see supportive therapy for connotative distinctions. Preventive therapy. Prophylactic therapy, a therapy that is intended to prevent a medical condition from occurring, also called prophylaxis. For example, many vaccines prevent infectious diseases. Salvage therapy, rescue therapy, a therapy tried after others have failed, it may be a last-line therapy. Step-down therapy that tapers the dosage gradually rather than abruptly cutting it off. For example, a switch from intravenous to oral antibiotics as an infection is brought under control steps down the intensity of therapy. Supportive therapy, a therapy that does not treat or improve the underlying condition, but rather increases the patient's comfort, also called symptomatic treatment, see there for more information. 10. For example, supportive care for flu, colds, or gastrointestinal upset can include rest, fluids, and over-the-counter pain relievers. Those things do not treat the cause, but they treat the symptoms and thus provide relief. Supportive therapy may be palliative therapy, palliative care. The two terms are sometimes synonymous, but palliative care often specifically refers to serious illness and end-of-life care. Therapy may be categorized as having curative intent, when it is possible to eliminate the disease, or palliative intent, when eliminating the disease is impossible and the focus shifts to minimizing the distress that it causes. The two are often contradistinguished, mutually exclusive, in some contexts, such as the management of some cancers, but they are not inherently mutually exclusive. Often therapy can be both curative and palliative simultaneously. Supportive psychotherapy aims to support the patient by alleviating the worst of the symptoms, with the expectation that definitive therapy can follow later if possible. Systemic therapy, a therapy that is systemic. In the physiological sense, this means affecting the whole body, rather than being local or loco-regional, whether via systemic administration, systemic effect, or both. Systemic therapy in the psychotherapeutic sense seeks to address people not only on the individual level, but also as people in relationships, dealing with the interactions of groups. By therapy composition, treatments can be classified according to the method of treatment. By matter. By drugs, pharmacotherapy, chemotherapy, also, medical therapy often means specifically pharmacotherapy. By medical devices, implantation, cardiac resynchronization therapy. By specific molecules, molecular therapy. Although most drugs are specific molecules, molecular medicine refers in particular to medicine relying on molecular biology. By specific biomolecular targets, targeted therapy. Molecular chaperone therapy. By chelation, chelation therapy. By specific chemical elements. By metals. By heavy metals. By gold, chrysotherapy, orotherapy. By platinum-containing drugs, platin therapy. By biometals. By lithium, lithium therapy. By potassium, potassium supplementation. By magnesium, magnesium supplementation. By chromium, chromium supplementation, phonemic neurological hypochromium therapy. By copper, copper supplementation. By nonmetals. By diatomic oxygen, oxygen therapy, hyperbaric oxygen therapy, hyperbaric medicine. Transdermal continuous oxygen therapy. By triatomic oxygen, ozone therapy. By fluoride, fluoride therapy. By other gases, medical gas therapy. By water, hydrotherapy. Aquatic therapy. Rehydration therapy. Oral rehydration therapy. Water cure, therapy. By biological materials, biogenic substances, biomolecules, biotic materials, natural products, including their synthetic equivalents, biotherapy. By whole organisms. By viruses, virotherapy. By bacteriophages, phage therapy. By animal interaction, see animal interaction section. By constituents or products of organisms. By plant parts or extracts, but many drugs are derived from plants, even when the term phytotherapy is not used. Scientific type, phytotherapy. Traditional, pre-scientific, type, herbalism. By animal parts, quackery involving shark fins, tiger parts, and so on, often driving threat or endangerment of species. By genes, gene therapy. Gene therapy for epilepsy. Gene therapy for osteoarthritis. Gene therapy for color blindness. Gene therapy of the human retina. Gene therapy in Parkinson's disease. By epigenetics, epigenetic therapy. By proteins, protein therapy, but many drugs are proteins despite not being called protein therapy. By enzymes, enzyme replacement therapy. By hormones, hormone therapy. Hormonal therapy, oncology. Hormone replacement therapy. Estrogen replacement therapy. Androgen replacement therapy. Hormone replacement therapy, menopause. Transgender hormone therapy. Feminizing hormone therapy. Masculinizing hormone therapy. Anti-hormone therapy. Androgen deprivation therapy. By whole cells, cell therapy, cytotherapy. By stem cells, stem cell therapy. By immune cells, see immune system products below. By immune system products, immunotherapy, host modulatory therapy. By immune cells, T-cell vaccination, cell transfer therapy, autologous immune enhancement therapy, TK cell therapy. By humoral immune factors, antibody therapy. By whole serum, serotherapy, including antiserum therapy. By immunoglobulins, immunoglobulin therapy. By monoclonal antibodies, monoclonal antibody therapy. By urine, urine therapy, some scientific forms, many pre-scientific or pseudoscientific forms. By food and dietary choices. Medical nutrition therapy. Grape therapy, quackery. By salts, but many drugs are the salts of organic acids, even when drug therapy is not called by names reflecting that. By salts in the air. By natural dry salt air, taking the cure in desert locales, especially common in pre-scientific medicine, for example, one 19th century way to treat tuberculosis. By artificial dry salt air. Low humidity forms of speleotherapy. Negative air ionization therapy. By moist salt air. By natural moist salt air, seaside cure, especially common in pre-scientific medicine. By artificial moist salt air, water vapor forms of speleotherapy. By salts in the water. By mineral water, spa cure, taking the waters, especially common in pre-scientific medicine. By seawater, seaside cure, especially common in pre-scientific medicine. By aroma, aromatherapy. By other materials with mechanism of action unknown. By occlusion with duct tape occlusion therapy. By energy. By electric energy as electric current, electrotherapy, electroconvulsive therapy. Transcranial magnetic stimulation. Vagus nerve stimulation. By magnetic energy. Magnet therapy. Pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. Magnetic resonance therapy. By electromagnetic radiation, EMR. By light therapy, phototherapy. Ultraviolet light therapy. PUVA therapy. Photodynamic therapy. Photothermal therapy. Cytoluminescent therapy. Blood irradiation therapy. By darkness, dark therapy. By lasers, laser therapy. Low-level laser therapy. By gamma rays, radiosurgery. Gamma knife radiosurgery. Stereotactic radiation therapy. Cobalt therapy. By radiation generally, radiation therapy, radiotherapy. Intraoperative radiation therapy. By EMR particles. Particle therapy. Proton therapy. Electron therapy. Intraoperative electron radiation therapy. Auger therapy. Neutron therapy. Fast neutron therapy. Neutron capture therapy of cancer. By radioisotopes emitting EMR. By nuclear medicine. By brachytherapy. Quackery type, electromagnetic therapy, alternative medicine. By mechanical, manual therapy as massotherapy and therapy by exercise as in physical therapy. Inversion therapy. By sound. By ultrasound. Ultrasonic lithotripsy. Extracorporeal shockwave therapy. Sonodynamic therapy. By music, music therapy. By temperature. By heat, heat therapy, thermotherapy. By moderately elevated ambient temperatures, hyperthermia therapy. By dry warm surroundings, weigh-in therapy. By dry or humid warm surroundings, sauna, including infrared sauna, for sweat therapy. By cold. By extreme cold to specific tissue volumes, cryotherapy. By ice and compression, cold compression therapy. By ambient cold, hypothermia therapy for neonatal encephalopathy. By hot and cold alternation, contrast bath therapy. By procedure and human interaction. Surgery. By counseling, such as psychotherapy, see also, list of psychotherapies. Systemic therapy. By group psychotherapy, 11. By cognitive behavioral therapy. By cognitive therapy. By behavior therapy. By dialectical behavior therapy. By cognitive emotional behavioral therapy. By cognitive rehabilitation therapy. By family therapy. By education. By psychoeducation. By information therapy. By speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, vision therapy, massage therapy, chiropractic or acupuncture. By lifestyle modifications, such as avoiding unhealthy food or maintaining a predictable sleep schedule. By coaching. By animal interaction. By pets, assistance animals, or working animals, animal-assisted therapy. By horses, equine therapy, hippotherapy. By dogs, pet therapy with therapy dogs, including grief therapy dogs. By cats, pet therapy with therapy cats. By fish, ichthyotherapy, wading with fish, aquarium therapy, watching fish. By maggots, maggot therapy. By worms. By internal worms, helminthic therapy. By leeches, leech therapy. By immersion, animal bath. By meditation. by mindfulness, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, by reading, by bibliotherapy, by creativity, by expression, expressive therapy, by writing, writing therapy, journal therapy, by play, play therapy, by art, art therapy, sensory art therapy, comic book therapy, by gardening, horticultural therapy, by dance, dance therapy, by drama, drama therapy, by recreation, recreational therapy, by music, music therapy, by sleeping and waking, by deep sleep therapy, 12. By sleep deprivation, wake therapy, 13. See also. Biophilia hypothesis. Classification of pharmacotherapeutic referrals. Cure. Interventionism, medicine. Inverse benefit law. List of therapies. Greyhound therapy. Mature minor doctrine. Medicine. Medication. Nutraceutical. Prevention. Psychotherapy. Treatment as prevention. Therapeutic inertia. Therapeutic nihilism, the idea that treatment is useless. Palliative care, derived from the Latin root palliare, or to cloak, is an interdisciplinary medical caregiving approach aimed at optimizing quality of life and mitigating suffering among people with serious, complex, and often terminal illnesses. 1. Within the published literature, many definitions of palliative care exist. The World Health Organization, WHO, describes palliative care as an approach that improves the quality of life of patients and their families facing the problems associated with life-threatening illness, through the prevention and relief of suffering by means of early identification and impeccable assessment and treatment of pain and other problems, physical, psychosocial, and spiritual. 2. In the past, palliative care was a disease-specific approach, but today the WHO takes a broader patient-centered approach that suggests that the principles of palliative care should be applied as early as possible to any chronic and ultimately fatal illness. 3. This shift was important because if a disease-oriented approach is followed, the needs and preferences of the patient are not fully met and aspects of care, such as pain, quality of life, and social support, as well as spiritual and emotional needs, fail to be addressed. Rather, a patient-centered model prioritizes relief of suffering and tailors care to increase the quality of life for terminally ill patients. 4. Palliative care is appropriate for individuals with serious illnesses across the age spectrum and can be provided as the main goal of care or in tandem with curative treatment. It is provided by an interdisciplinary team which can include physicians, nurses, occupational and physical therapists, psychologists, social workers, chaplains, and dietitians. Palliative care can be provided in a variety of contexts, including hospitals, outpatient, skilled nursing, and home settings. Although an important part of end-of-life care, palliative care is not limited to individuals near the end of life. 1. Evidence supports the efficacy of a palliative care approach in improvement of a person's quality of life. 5. 6. Palliative care's main focus is to improve the quality of life for those with chronic illnesses. It is commonly the case that palliative care is provided at the end of life, but it can be helpful for a person of any stage of illness that is critical or any age. 7. Scope. Palliative care is able to improve healthcare quality in 3 sectors: physical and emotional relief, strengthening of patient-physician communication and decision-making, and coordinated continuity of care across various healthcare settings, including hospital, home, and hospice. 8. The overall goal of palliative care is to improve quality of life of individuals with serious illness, any life-threatening condition which either reduces an individual's daily function or quality of life or increases caregiver burden, through pain and symptom management, identification and support of caregiver needs, and care coordination. Palliative care can be delivered at any stage of illness alongside other treatments with curative or life-prolonging intent and is not restricted to people receiving end-of-life care. 9. 10. Historically, palliative care services were focused on individuals with incurable cancer, but this framework is now applied to other diseases, including severe heart failure. 11. Chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, multiple sclerosis and other neurodegenerative conditions. 12. 40 million people each year are expected to need palliative care, with approximately 78% of this population living in low and middle-income countries. However, only 14% of this population is able to receive this kind of care, with a majority in high-income countries, making this an important sector to pay attention to. 13. Palliative care can be initiated in a variety of care settings, including emergency rooms, hospitals, hospice facilities, or at home. 14. For some severe disease processes, medical specialty professional organizations recommend initiating palliative care at the time of diagnosis or when disease-directed options would not improve a patient's prognosis. For example, the American Society of Clinical Oncology recommends that patients with advanced cancer should be referred to interdisciplinary palliative care teams that provide inpatient and outpatient care early in the course of disease, alongside active treatment of their cancer within 8 weeks of diagnosis. 9. Appropriately engaging palliative care providers as a part of patient care improves overall symptom control, quality of life, and family satisfaction of care while reducing overall healthcare costs. 15. 16. Palliative care vis-a-vis hospice care. The distinction between palliative care and hospice differs depending on global context. In the United States, the term hospice refers specifically to a benefit provided by the federal government since 1982. Hospice care services and palliative care programs share similar goals of mitigating unpleasant symptoms, controlling pain, optimizing comfort, and addressing psychological distress. Hospice care focuses on comfort and psychological support, and curative therapies are not pursued. 17. Under the Medicare hospice benefit, individuals certified by 2 physicians to have less than 6 months to live, assuming a typical course, have access to specialized hospice services through various insurance programs, Medicare, Medicaid, and most health maintenance organizations and private insurers. An individual's hospice benefits are not revoked if that individual lives beyond a 6-month period. In the United States, in order to be eligible for hospice, patients usually forego treatments aimed at cure, unless they are minors. This is to avoid what is called concurrent care, where 2 different clinicians are billing for the same service. In 2016, a movement began to extend the reach of concurrent care to adults who were eligible for hospice but not yet emotionally prepared to forego curative treatments. 18. Outside the United States, the term hospice usually refers to a building or institution that specializes in palliative care. These institutions provide care to patients with end-of-life and palliative care needs. In the common vernacular outside the United States, hospice care and palliative care are synonymous and are not contingent on different avenues of funding. 19. Over 40% of all dying patients in the United States currently undergo hospice care. 20. Most of the hospice care occurs at a home environment during the last weeks/months of their lives. Of those patients, 86.6% believe their care is excellent. 20. Hospice's philosophy is that death is a part of life, so it is personal and unique. Caregivers are encouraged to discuss death with the patients and encourage spiritual exploration, if they so wish. 21. History. Globe icon. The examples and perspective in this section deal primarily with the United States and do not represent a worldwide view of the subject. You may improve this section, discuss the issue on the talk page, or create a new section, as appropriate. July 2022, learn how and when to remove this template message. The field of palliative care grew out of the hospice movement, which is commonly associated with Dame Cicely Saunders, who founded St. Christopher's Hospice for the terminally ill in 1967. 22. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who published her seminal work on death and dying in 1969, citation needed. In 1974, Balfour Mount coined the term palliative care. 22. And Paul Hentelef became the director of a new terminal care unit at St. Boniface Hospital in Winnipeg. 23. In 1987, Declan Walsh established a palliative medicine service at the Cleveland Clinic Cancer Center in Ohio, which later expanded to become the training site of the first palliative care clinical and research fellowship as well as the first acute pain and palliative care inpatient unit in the United States. 24. The program evolved into the Harry R. Horvitz Center for Palliative Medicine, which was designated as an international demonstration project by the World Health Organization and accredited by the European Society for Medical Oncology as an integrated center of oncology and palliative care. 25. Advances in palliative care have since inspired a dramatic increase in hospital-based palliative care programs. Notable research outcomes forwarding the implementation of palliative care programs include evidence that hospital palliative care consult teams are associated with significant hospital and overall health system cost savings. 26. 27. Evidence that palliative care services increase the likelihood of dying at home and reduce symptom burden without impacting on caregiver grief among the vast majority of Americans who prefer to die at home. 28. Evidence that providing palliative care in tandem with standard oncologic care among patients with advanced cancer is associated with lower rates of depression, increased quality of life, and increased length of survival compared to those receiving standard oncologic care. 29. 6. And may even prolong survival. 30. Over 90% of U.S. hospitals with more than 300 beds have palliative care teams, yet only 17% of rural hospitals with 50 or more beds have palliative care teams. 31. Hospice and palliative medicine has been a board-certified subspecialty of medicine in the United States since 2006. Additionally, in 2011, the Joint Commission began an advanced certification program for palliative care that recognizes hospital inpatient programs demonstrating outstanding care and enhancement of the quality of life for people with serious illness. 32. Symptom assessment. One instrument used in palliative care is the Edmonton Symptom Assessment Scale, ESAS, which consists of 8 visual analog scales, VAS, ranging from 0 to 10, indicating the levels of pain, activity, nausea, depression, anxiety, drowsiness, appetite, sensation of well-being, and sometimes shortness of breath. 33, 34, a score of 0 indicates absence of the symptom, and a score of 10 indicates the worst possible severity. 33, the instrument can be completed by the patient, with or without assistance, or by nurses and relatives. 34. Interventions. Medications used in palliative care can be common medications but used for a different indication based on established practices with varying degrees of evidence. 35. Examples include the use of antipsychotic medications, anticonvulsants, and morphine. Routes of administration may differ from acute or chronic care, as many people in palliative care lose the ability to swallow. A common alternative route of administration is subcutaneous, as it is less traumatic and less difficult to maintain than intravenous medications. Other routes of administration include sublingual, intramuscular, and transdermal. Medications are often managed at home by family or nursing support. 36. Palliative care interventions in care homes may contribute to lower discomfort for residents with dementia and to improve family members' views of the quality of care. 37. However, higher quality research is needed to support the benefits of these interventions for older people dying in these facilities. 37, 38. High certainty evidence supports the finding that implementation of home-based end-of-life care programs may increase the number of adults who will die at home and slightly improve patient satisfaction at a 1-month follow-up. 39. The impact of home-based end-of-life care on caregivers, healthcare staff, and health service costs are uncertain. 39. Pain, distress, and anxiety. See also, distress in cancer caregiving. For many patients, end-of-life care can cause emotional and psychological distress, contributing to their total suffering. 40. An interdisciplinary palliative care team consisting of a mental health professional, social worker, counselor, as well as spiritual support such as a chaplain, can play important roles in helping people and their families cope using various methods such as counseling, visualization, cognitive methods, drug therapy, and relaxation therapy to address their needs. Palliative pets can play a role in this last category. 41. Total pain. In the 1960s, hospice pioneer Cicely Saunders first introduced the term total pain to describe the heterogeneous nature of pain. 42. This is the idea that a patient's experience of total pain has distinctive roots in the physical, psychological, social, and spiritual realm, but that they are all still closely linked to one another. Identifying the cause of pain can help guide care for some patients and impact their quality of life overall. 43. Physical pain. Physical pain can be managed using pain medications as long as they do not put the patient at further risk for developing or increasing medical diagnoses such as heart problems or difficulty breathing. 43. Patients at the end of life can exhibit many physical symptoms that can cause extreme pain such as dyspnea. 44. Or difficulty breathing, coughing, xerostomia, dry mouth, nausea and vomiting, constipation, fever, delirium, and excessive oral and pharyngeal secretions, death rattle. 45. Radiation is commonly used with palliative intent to alleviate pain in patients with cancer. As an effect from radiation may take days to weeks to occur, patients dying a short time following their treatment are unlikely to receive benefit. 46. Psychosocial pain and anxiety. Once the immediate physical pain has been dealt with, it is important to remember to be a compassionate and empathetic caregiver that is there to listen and be there for their patients. Being able to identify the distressing factors in their life other than the pain can help them be more comfortable. 47. When a patient has their needs met, then they are more likely to be open to the idea of hospice or treatments outside comfort care. Having a psychosocial assessment allows the medical team to help facilitate a healthy patient-family understanding of adjustment, coping and support. This communication between the medical team and the patients and family can also help facilitate discussions on the process of maintaining and enhancing relationships, finding meaning in the dying process, and achieving a sense of control while confronting and preparing for death. 43. For adults with anxiety, medical evidence in the form of high-quality randomized trials is insufficient to determine the most effective treatment approach to reduce the symptoms of anxiety. 48. Spirituality. Spirituality is a fundamental component of palliative care. According to the Clinical Practice Guidelines for Quality Palliative Care, spirituality is a dynamic and intrinsic aspect of humanity and has been associated with an improved quality of life for those with chronic and serious illness, especially for patients who are living with incurable and advanced illnesses of a chronic nature. 49, 50, 51. Spiritual beliefs and practices can influence perceptions of pain and distress, as well as quality of life among advanced cancer patients. 47. Spiritual needs are often described in literature as including loving/being loved, forgiveness, and deciphering the meaning of life. 52, 53. Most spiritual interventions are subjective and complex. 54, 49. Many have not been well evaluated for their effectiveness, however tools can be used to measure and implement effective spiritual care. 49, 53, 55. Nausea and vomiting. Nausea and vomiting are common in people who have advanced terminal illness and can cause distress. Several antiemetic pharmacologic options are suggested to help alleviate these symptoms. For people who do not respond to first-line medications, levomipramazine may be used, however there have been insufficient clinical trials to assess the effectiveness of this medication. 56. Haloperidol and droperidol are other medications that are sometimes prescribed to help alleviate nausea and vomiting. However, further research is also required to understand how effective these medications may be. 57, 58. Hydration and nutrition. Many terminally ill people cannot consume adequate food or drink. Providing medically assisted food or drink to prolong their life and improve the quality of their life is common, however there have been few high-quality studies to determine best practices and the effectiveness of these approaches. 59, 60. Pediatric palliative care. Pediatric palliative care is family-centered, specialized medical care for children with serious illnesses that focuses on mitigating the physical, emotional, psychosocial, and spiritual suffering associated with illness to ultimately optimize quality of life. Pediatric palliative care practitioners receive specialized training in family-centered, developmental and age-appropriate skills in communication and facilitation of shared decision-making, assessment and management of pain and distressing symptoms, advanced knowledge in care coordination of multidisciplinary pediatric caregiving medical teams, referral to hospital and ambulatory resources available to patients and families, and psychologically supporting children and families through illness and bereavement. 61. Symptoms assessment and management of children. As with palliative care for adults, symptom assessment and management is a critical component of pediatric palliative care as it improves quality of life, gives children and families a sense of control, and prolongs life in some cases. 19. The general approach to assessment and management of distressing symptoms in children by a palliative care team is as follows. Identify and assess symptoms through history taking, focusing on location, quality, time course, as well as exacerbating and mitigating stimuli. Symptoms assessment in children is uniquely challenging due to communication barriers depending on the child's ability to identify and communicate about symptoms. Thus, both the child and caregivers should provide the clinical history. With this said, children as young as 4 years of age can indicate the location and severity of pain through visual mapping techniques and metaphors. 62. Perform a thorough exam of the child. Special attention to the child's behavioral response to exam components, particularly in regards to potentially painful stimuli. A commonly held myth is that premature and neonatal infants do not experience pain due to their immature pain pathways, but research demonstrates pain perception in these age groups is equal or greater than that of adults, 63, 64. With this said, some children experiencing intolerable pain present with psychomotor inertia, a phenomenon where a child in severe chronic pain presents overly well-behaved or depressed, 65. These patients demonstrate behavioral responses consistent with pain relief when titrated with morphine. Finally, because children behaviorally respond to pain atypically, a playing or sleeping child should not be assumed to be without pain. 19. Identify the place of treatment, tertiary versus local hospital, intensive care unit, home, hospice, etc. Anticipate symptoms based on the typical disease course of the hypothesized diagnosis. Present treatment options to the family proactively, based on care options and resources available in each of the aforementioned care settings. Ensuing management should anticipate transitions of palliative care settings to afford seamless continuity of service provision across health, education, and social care settings. Consider both pharmacologic and non-pharmacologic treatment modalities, education and mental health support, administration of hot and cold packs, massage, play therapy, distraction therapy, hypnotherapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and complementary therapies, when addressing distressing symptoms. Respite care is an additional practice that can further aid alleviating the physical and mental pain from the child and its family. By allowing the caregiving to ensue by other qualified individuals, it allows the family time to rest and renew themselves. 66. Assess how the child perceives their symptoms, based on personal views, to create individualized care plans. After the implementation of therapeutic interventions, involve both the child and family in the reassessment of symptoms. 19. The most common symptoms in children with severe chronic disease appropriate for palliative care consultation are weakness, fatigue, pain, poor appetite, weight loss, agitation, lack of mobility, shortness of breath, nausea and vomiting, constipation, sadness or depression, drowsiness, difficulty with speech, headache, excess secretions, anemia, pressure area problems, anxiety, fever, and mouth sores. 67. 68. The most common end-of-life symptoms in children include shortness of breath, cough, fatigue, pain, nausea and vomiting, agitation and anxiety, poor concentration, skin lesions, swelling of the extremities, seizures, poor appetite, difficulty with feeding, and diarrhea. 69. 70. In older children with neurologic and neuromuscular manifestations of disease, there is a high burden of anxiety and depression that correlates with disease progression, increasing disability, and greater dependence on carers. 71. From the caregiver's perspective, families find changes in behavior. Reported pain, lack of appetite, changes in appearance, talking to God or angels, breathing changes, weakness, and fatigue to be the most distressing symptoms to witness in their loved ones. 72. As discussed above, within the field of adult palliative medicine, validated symptoms assessment tools are frequently utilized by providers, but these tools lack essential aspects of children's symptom experience. 73. Within pediatrics, there is not a comprehensive symptoms assessment widely employed. A few symptoms assessment tools trialed among older children receiving palliative care include the Symptom Distress Scale, and the Memorial Symptom Assessment Scale, and Childhood Cancer Stressors Inventory. 74, 75, 76. Quality of life considerations within pediatrics are unique and an important component of symptoms assessment. The Pediatric Cancer Quality of Life Inventory 32, PCQL 32, is a standardized parent proxy report which assesses cancer treatment-related symptoms, focusing mainly on pain and nausea. But again, this tool does not comprehensively assess all palliative or symptoms issues. 77, 78. Symptom assessment tools for younger age groups are rarely utilized as they have limited value, especially for infants and young children who are not at a developmental stage where they can article. Communication with children and families. Within the realm of pediatric medical care, the palliative care team is tasked with facilitating family-centered communication with children and their families, as well as multidisciplinary pediatric caregiving medical teams to forward coordinated medical management and the child's quality of life. 79. Strategies for communication are complex as the pediatric palliative care practitioners must facilitate a shared understanding of and consensus for goals of care and therapies available to the sick child amongst multiple medical teams who often have different areas of expertise. Additionally, pediatric palliative care practitioners must assess both the sick child and their family's understanding of complex illness and options for care, and provide accessible, thoughtful education to address knowledge gaps and allow for informed decision-making. Finally, practitioners are supporting children and families in the queries, emotional distress, and decision-making that ensues from the child's illness. Many frameworks for communication have been established within the medical literature, but the field of pediatric palliative care is still in relative infancy. Communication considerations and strategies employed in a palliative setting include developing supportive relationships with patients and families. An essential component of a provider's ability to provide individualized palliative care is their ability to obtain an intimate understanding of the child and family's preferences and overall character. On initial consultation, palliative care providers often focus on affirming a caring relationship with the pediatric patient and their family by first asking the child how they would describe themselves and what is important to them, communicating in an age and developmentally cognizant fashion. The provider may then gather similar information from the child's caregivers. Questions practitioners may ask include: what does the child enjoy doing? What do they most dislike doing? What does a typical day look like for the child? Other topics potentially addressed by the palliative care provider may also include familial rituals as well as spiritual and religious beliefs, life goals for the child, and the meaning of illness within the broader context of the child and their family's life. 61. Developing a shared understanding of the child's condition with the patient and their family. The establishment of shared knowledge between medical providers, patients, and families is essential when determining palliative goals of care for pediatric patients. Initially, practitioners often elicit information from the patient and child to ascertain these parties' baseline understanding of the child's situation. 80. Assessing for baseline knowledge allows the palliative care provider to identify knowledge gaps and provide education on those topics. Through this process, families can pursue informed, shared medical decision-making regarding their child's care. A framework often employed by pediatric palliative care providers is ask, tell, ask, where the provider asks the patient and their family for a question to identify their level of comprehension of the situation, and then subsequently supplements the family's knowledge with additional expert knowledge. 80. 81. This information is often conveyed without jargon or euphemism to maintain trust and ensure understanding. Providers iteratively check for comprehension of this knowledge supplementation by asking questions related to previous explanations, as information retention can be challenging when undergoing a stressful experience. 80. Establishing meaning and dignity regarding the child's illness. As part of developing a shared understanding of a child's illness and character, palliative providers will assess both the child and their family's symbolic and emotional relationship to disease. As both the somatic and psychologic implications of illness can be distressing to children, palliative care practitioners look for opportunities to establish meaning and dignity regarding the child's illness by contextualizing disease within a broader framework of the child's life. 82. 83. Derived from the fields of dignity therapy and meaning-centered psychotherapy, the palliative care provider may explore the following questions with the sick child and their family. What gives your life meaning, worth, or purpose? Where do you find strength and support? What inspires you? How do you like to be thought of? What are you most proud of? What are the particular things you would like your family to know or remember about you? When was the last time you laughed really hard? Are you frightened by all of this? What, in particular, are you most frightened of? What is the meaning of this illness experience for you? Do you ever think about why this happened to you? 82. 83. Assessing preferences for decision-making. Medical decision-making in a pediatric setting is unique in that it is often the child's legal guardians, not the patient, who ultimately consent for most medical treatments. Yet within a palliative care setting, it is particularly consequential to incorporate the child's preferences within the ultimate goals of care. Equally important to consider, families may vary in the level of responsibility they want in this decision-making process. 84. Their preference may range from wanting to be the child's sole decision-makers, to partnering with the medical team in a shared decision-making model, to advocating for full deferral of decision-making responsibility to the clinician. 84. Palliative care providers clarify a family's preferences and support needs for medical decision-making by providing context, information, and options for treatment and medical palliation. In the case of critically ill babies, parents are able to participate more in decision-making if they are presented with options to be discussed rather than recommendations by the doctor. Utilizing this style of communication also leads to less conflict with doctors and might help the parents cope better with the eventual outcomes. 85-86. Optimizing the environment for effective conversations around prognosis and goals of care. Essential to facilitating supportive, clear communication around potentially distressing topics such as prognosis and goals of care for seriously ill pediatric patients is optimizing the setting where this communication will take place and developing informed consensus among the child's caregiving team regarding goals and options for care. Often, these conversations occur within the context of family meetings, which are formal meetings between families and the child's multidisciplinary medical team. Prior to the family meeting, providers often meet to discuss the child's overall case, reasonably expected prognosis, and options for care, in addition to clarifying specific roles each provider will take on during the family meeting. During this meeting, the multidisciplinary medical team may also discuss any legal or ethical considerations related to the case. Palliative care providers often facilitate this meeting and help synthesize its outcome for children and their families. Experts in optimized communication, palliative care providers may opt to hold the family meeting in a quiet space where the providers and family can sit and address concerns during a time when all parties are not constrained. Additionally, parents' preferences regarding information exchange with the sick child present should be clarified. 87-88. If the child's guardians are resistant to disclosing information in front of their child, the child's provider may explore parental concerns on the topic. When excluded from family meetings and moments of challenging information exchange, adolescents, in particular, may have challenges with trusting their medical providers if they feel critical information is being withheld. It is important to follow the child's lead when deciding whether to disclose difficult information. Additionally, including them in these conversations can help the child fully participate in their care and medical decision-making. 79-84-89. Finally, it is important to prioritize the family's agenda while additionally considering any urgent medical decisions needed to advance the child's care. Supporting emotional distress. A significant role of the pediatric palliative care provider is to help support children, their families, and their caregiving teams through the emotional stress of illness. Communication strategies the palliative care provider may employ in this role are asking for permission when engaging with potentially distressing conversations, naming emotions witnessed to create opportunities to discuss complex emotional responses to illness, actively listening, and allowing for invitational silence. 90. The palliative care provider may iteratively assess the child and family's emotional responses and needs during challenging conversations. At times, the medical team may be hesitant to discuss a child's prognosis out of fear of increasing distress. This sentiment is not supported by the literature. Among adults, end-of-life discussions are not associated with increased rates of anxiety or depression. 91. Though this topic is not well studied in pediatric populations, conversations about prognosis have the potential to increase in parental hope and peace of mind. 92. Spike Framework. This is a framework that is designed to assist healthcare workers deliver bad news. 81. The acronym stands for Setting, Perception, Invitation, Knowledge, Empathy, and Summarize/Strategy. When giving bad news, it is important to consider the setting, which considers the environment in which the healthcare provider is delivering the news, including privacy, sitting, time, and the inclusion of family members. What to say should also be considered, as well as rehearsed. It is important to understand how a patient is receiving the information by asking open-ended questions and asking them to repeat what they learned in their own words, which is perception aspect of the framework. The healthcare provider should seek an invitation from the patient to disclose additional information before doing so in order to prevent overwhelming or distressing the patient further. In order to ensure the patient understands what is being told, knowledge must be used. This includes speaking in a way that the patient will understand, using simple words, not being excessively blunt, giving information in small chunks and checking in with the patient to confirm that they understand, and not providing poor information that may not be completely true. In order to alleviate some of a patient's distress, it is crucial to be empathetic in the sense of understanding how a patient is feeling and the reactions they are having. This can allow one to change how they are delivering information, allow the patient to have time to process the information, or console them if needed. Connecting with patients is an important step in delivering bad news. Maintaining eye contact proves that the healthcare provider is present and the patient and family has their full attention. Furthermore, the provider may make a connection by touching the patient's shoulder or hand, giving them a physical connection to know that they are not alone. 93, 94. Finally, it is important to summarize all the information given in order to ensure the patient fully understands and takes away the major points. Additionally, patients who have a clear plan for the future are less likely to feel anxious and uncertain, but it is important to ask people if they are ready for that information before providing them with it. 95, 96. Geriatric palliative care. With the transition in the population toward lower child mortality and lower death rates, countries around the world are seeing larger elderly populations. In some countries, this means a growing burden on national resources in the shape of social security and health care payments. As aging populations put increasing pressure on existing resources, long-term palliative care for patients' non-communicable, chronic conditions has emerged as a necessary approach to increase these patients' quality of life, through prevention and relief by identifying, assessing, and treating the source of pain and other psychosocial and spiritual problems. 97. Society. Costs and funding. Funding for hospice and palliative care services varies. In Great Britain and many other countries, all palliative care is offered free, either through the National Health Service or through charities working in partnership with the local health services. Palliative care services in the United States are paid by philanthropy, fee-for-service mechanisms, or from direct hospital support, while hospice care is provided as a Medicare benefit. Similar hospice benefits are offered by Medicaid and most private health insurers. Under the Medicare Hospice Benefit, MHB, a person signs off their Medicare Part B, acute hospital payment, and enrolls in the MHB through Medicare Part B with direct care provided by a Medicare-certified hospice agency. Under terms of the MHB, the hospice agency is responsible for the care plan and may not bill the person for services. The hospice agency, together with the person's primary physician, is responsible for determining the care plan. All costs related to the terminal illness are paid from a per diem rate, US $126 per day, that the hospice agency receives from Medicare. This includes all drugs and equipment, nursing, social service, chaplain visits, and other services deemed appropriate by the hospice agency. Medicare does not pay for custodial care. People may elect to withdraw from the MHB and return to Medicare Part A and later re-enroll in hospice. Citation needed. Certification and training for services. In most countries, hospice care and palliative care is provided by an interdisciplinary team consisting of physicians, pharmacists, nurses, nursing assistants, social workers, chaplains, and caregivers. In some countries, additional members of the team may include certified nursing assistants and home healthcare aides, as well as volunteers from the community, largely untrained but some being skilled medical personnel, and housekeepers. In the United States, the physician subspecialty of hospice and palliative medicine was established in 2006, 98, to provide expertise in the care of people with life-limiting, advanced disease, and catastrophic injury, the relief of distressing symptoms, the coordination of interdisciplinary care in diverse settings, the use of specialized care systems including hospice, the management of the imminently dying patient, and legal and ethical decision-making in end-of-life care. 99. Caregivers, both family and volunteers, are crucial to the palliative care system. Caregivers and people being treated often form lasting friendships over the course of care. As a consequence, caregivers may find themselves under severe emotional and physical strain. Opportunities for caregiver respite are some of the services hospices provide to promote caregiver well-being. Respite may last a few hours up to several days, the latter being done by placing the primary person being cared for in a nursing home or inpatient hospice unit for several days. 100. In the U.S., board certification for physicians in palliative care was through the American Board of Hospice and Palliative Medicine. Recently this was changed to be done through any of 11 different specialty boards through an American Board of Medical Specialties approved procedure. Additionally, board certification is available to osteopathic physicians, DO, in the United States through 4 medical specialty boards through an American Osteopathic Association Bureau of Osteopathic Specialists approved procedure. 101. More than 50 fellowship programs provide 1 to 2 years of specialty training following a primary residency. In the United Kingdom, palliative care has been a full specialty of medicine since 1989 and training is governed by the same regulations through the Royal College of Physicians as with any other medical specialty. 102. Nurses, in the United States and internationally, can receive continuing education credits through palliative care specific trainings. such as those offered by End-of-Life Nursing Education Consortium, ELNEC. 103. The Tata Memorial Center in Mumbai has offered a physician's course in palliative medicine since 2012, the first one of its kind in the country. Regional variation in services. See also, hospice care in the United States. In the United States, hospice and palliative care represent two different aspects of care with similar philosophies, but with different payment systems and location of services. Palliative care services are most often provided in acute care hospitals organized around an interdisciplinary consultation service, with or without an acute inpatient palliative care unit. Palliative care may also be provided in the dying person's home as a bridge program between traditional U.S. home care services and hospice care, or provided in long-term care facilities. 104. In contrast, over 80% of hospice care in the U.S. is provided at home, with the remainder provided to people in long-term care facilities or in freestanding hospice residential facilities. In the UK, hospice is seen as one part of the speciality of palliative care, and no differentiation is made between hospice and palliative care. In the UK, palliative care services offer inpatient care, home care, day care, and outpatient services, and work in close partnership with mainstream services. Hospices often house a full range of services and professionals for children and adults. In 2015, the UK's palliative care was ranked as the best in the world due to comprehensive national policies, the extensive integration of palliative care into the National Health Service, a strong hospice movement, and deep community engagement on the issue. 105. In 2021, the UK's National Palliative and End-of-Life Care Partnership published their 6 ambitions for 2021 to 26. These include fair access to end-of-life care for everyone regardless of who they are, where they live, or their circumstances, and the need to maximize comfort and well-being. Informed and timely conversations are also highlighted. 106. Acceptance and access. The focus on a person's quality of life has increased greatly since the 1990s. In the United States today, 55% of hospitals with more than 100 beds offer a palliative care program. 107, and nearly 1/5 of community hospitals have palliative care programs. 108. A relatively recent development is the palliative care team, a dedicated health care team that is entirely geared toward palliative treatment. Physicians practicing palliative care do not always receive support from the people they are treating, family members, healthcare professionals, or their social peers. More than half of physicians in one survey reported that they have had at least one experience where a patient's family members, another physician, or another healthcare professional had characterized their work as being euthanasia, murder, or killing during the last 5 years. A quarter of them had received similar comments from their own friends or family member, or from a patient. 109. Despite significant progress that has been made to increase access to palliative care within the United States and other countries, many countries have not yet considered palliative care as a public health problem, and therefore do not include it in their public health agenda. 3. Resources and cultural attitudes both play significant roles in the acceptance and implementation of palliative care in the healthcare agenda. A study identified the current gaps in palliative care for people with severe mental illness, SMIs. They found that due to the lack of resources within both mental health and end-of-life services, people with SMIs faced a number of barriers to accessing timely and appropriate palliative care. They called for a multidisciplinary team approach, including advocacy, with a point of contact coordinating the appropriate support for the individual. They also state that end-of-life and mental health care needs to be included in the training for professionals. 110, 111. A review states that by restricting referrals to palliative care only when patients have a definitive timeline for death, something that the study found to often be inaccurate, can have negative implications for the patient both when accessing end-of-life care, or being unable to access services due to not receiving a timeline from medical professionals. The authors call for a less rigid approach to referrals to palliative care services in order to better support the individual, improve quality of life remaining, and provide more holistic care. 112. 113. Many people with chronic pain are stigmatized and treated as opioid addicts. Patients can build a tolerance to drugs and have to take more and more to manage their pain. The symptoms of chronic pain patients do not show up on scans, so the doctor must go off trust alone. This is the reason that some wait to consult their doctor and endure sometimes years of pain before seeking help. 114. Popular media. Palliative care was the subject of the 2018 Netflix short documentary, Endgame by directors Rob Epstein and Jeffrey Friedman, 115, about terminally ill patients in a San Francisco hospital and features the work of palliative care physician, B.J. Miller. The film's executive producers were Stephen Ungerleider, David C. Ulick and Shoshana R. Ungerleider, 116. In 2016, an open letter, 117, to the singer David Bowie written by a palliative care doctor, Professor Mark Taubert, talked about the importance of good palliative care, being able to express wishes about the last months of life, and good tuition and education about end-of-life care generally. The letter went viral after David Bowie's son Duncan Jones shared it. 118. The letter was subsequently read out by the actor Benedict Cumberbatch and the singer Jarvis Cocker at public events. 119. Research funded by the UK's National Institute for Health and Care Research, NIHR, has addressed these areas of need. 120. Examples highlight inequalities faced by several groups and offers recommendations. These include the need for close partnership between services caring for people with severe mental illness. 121, 122, improved understanding of barriers faced by Gypsy, Traveler and Roma communities. 123, 124, the provision of flexible palliative care services for children from ethnic minorities or deprived areas. 125, 126. Other research suggests that giving nurses and pharmacists easier access to electronic patient records about prescribing could help people manage their symptoms at home. 127, 128, a named professional to support and guide patients and carers through the healthcare system could also improve the experience of care at home at the end of life. 129, 130, a synthesized review looking at palliative care in the UK created a resource showing which services were available and grouped them according to their intended purpose and benefit to the patient. They also stated that currently in the UK palliative services are only available to patients with a timeline to death, usually 12 months or less. They found these timelines to often be inaccurate and created barriers to patients accessing appropriate services. They call for a more holistic approach to end-of-life care which is not restricted by arbitrary timelines. 131, 132. See also: Health Advocate, Healthcare Reform, Health Insurance innovations.